The suit costs more than you'll make in a year, but if you can fit into that suit in 6 months, I'll marry you." The words cut through the champagne-soaked laughter at TechVista's executive showroom like a verdict. 200 tech elites, venture capitalists, and industry journalists turned in unison to see who had become the evening's entertainment. Larry Earley, 32, stood frozen in the doorway, one hand still gripping his industrial mop, the other clutching his cleaning cart. His worn-out sneakers, covered in scuff marks from 1,000 night shifts, suddenly felt impossibly heavy. The oversized janitor uniform, navy blue with a faded TechVista logo, hung on his 6 feet 2 inches, 340-pound frame like a tent hiding everything he'd learned to make invisible. Jolie Dooley, 38, TechVista's newly crowned CEO and Silicon Valley's latest billionaire darling, stood at the center of the showroom with a champagne flute raised like a weapon. Her platinum bob caught the track lighting perfectly, as if even her hair had been engineered for maximum impact. The Forbes estimate put her net worth at $4.2 billion from the AI startup acquisition that had made her a tech legend at lightning speed. "I'm completely serious," Jolie continued, her ice blue eyes sparkling with performative generosity. She gestured toward the centerpiece of the exhibition, a Tom Ford custom-tailored suit displayed on a mannequin under museum-quality spotlighting. "That masterpiece costs $45,000. It's designed for the modern alpha male. Discipline, excellence, evolution." She turned back to Larry, her smile sharpening. 6 months. You fit into that, and I'll live stream our wedding on Tech Talk. From janitor to CEO's husband. Can you imagine the publicity? The explosion of laughter was instantaneous. Phones emerged from pockets and clutches. Camera flashes began documenting the moment for LinkedIn posts, Instagram stories, Twitter threads. Within 90 seconds, someone had created the hashtag Janitor Challenge. Within 5 minutes, it was trending. The suit itself seemed to mock him from its pedestal. Charcoal gray, razor-sharp lines, waist tailored for someone who measured success in body fat percentages and quarterly gains. A work of art made for bodies sculpted in exclusive gyms and maintained by private chefs and performance nutritionists. Larry felt the heat crawl up his neck, spreading across his face in a flush that made his dark skin feel like it was burning from the inside. His vision blurred slightly. Not from tears, not yet, but from the pure overwhelming weight of being seen in the worst possible way. He had perfected the art of invisibility over 3 years of night shifts. He moved through these halls like a ghost, present but unnoticed, necessary but beneath consideration. But now, every eye in the room was on him. "Don't be shy," a woman in a silver cocktail dress called out. "Take the deal. Rich husbands don't grow on trees." More laughter. Someone started a slow clap that died when no one joined in. Larry's hands tightened on the mop handle until his knuckles ached. He wanted to say something, anything, but his throat had closed. Every prepared comeback, every dignified response evaporated under the weight of 200 people watching him be reduced to a punchline. So he did the only thing he could do. He lowered his head, turned his cleaning cart around, and walked back toward the service corridor. Each step away from that showroom felt like dragging himself through concrete. Each burst of laughter behind him landed like a physical blow between his shoulder blades. "Hey, I'm leaving the offer on the table," Jolie's voice followed him, tinged with mock encouragement. 6 months. The suit will be waiting. Applause rippled through the crowd, as if they'd just witnessed the climax of a Broadway show instead of a human being's humiliation. Larry pushed through the service door. The heavy metal barrier swung shut behind him, muffling the party sounds into a distant hum. The service corridor stretched ahead, fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, the familiar smell of industrial cleaner and floor wax surrounding him like a bitter homecoming. He leaned against the cold cinderblock wall, finally alone except for the towers of boxed printer paper and the recycling bins waiting to be emptied. And then the tears came. Not loud. Not dramatic. Just silent streams running down his face as 3 years of swallowed pride finally found a crack in his armor. But something else was happening too, beneath the shame and the hurt. Something that had been dormant for so long he'd almost forgotten what it felt like. Anger. Not the hot, explosive kind. The cold, calculating kind. The The kind that doesn't shout, but plans. The kind that transforms humiliation into fuel. Larry wiped his face with the rough sleeve of his uniform, straightened his shoulders, and made a promise in that empty hallway surrounded by the debris of corporate excess. In 6 months, he would walk back into that showroom. Not for Jolie Dooley's approval. Not for a televised spectacle. Not even to prove the laughing crowd wrong. But to remember what it felt like to be visible for the right reasons. What none of those champagne-drunk executives knew, what Jolie Dooley's research team had never bothered to discover, was that Larry Earley wasn't just a janitor. 3 years ago, he had been a PhD candidate at Stanford University, 2 semesters away from completing groundbreaking research in ethical AI deployment. His algorithm had been discussed in the same conference rooms where tonight's humiliation had occurred. His papers had been cited by the same venture capitalists who just laughed at him. Until his younger sister Maya was diagnosed with acute leukemia at 19 years old. Their parents had died in a car accident when Larry was 21, making him Maya's only family. So he made a choice. He dropped out of Stanford, shelved his research, and took the first job that offered health insurance and flexible hours. Night janitor at Tech Vista. It gave him access to the medical coverage that kept Maya alive and the daytime freedom to sit beside her hospital bed during chemotherapy sessions. For 3 years, he had mopped the floors of his own unrealized future. But that night, something shifted. Larry pulled out his phone. The screen cracked from a drop 6 months ago he couldn't afford to repair, and typed 4 words into the search bar. Jolie Dooley Neuralink fraud. What Jolie Dooley also didn't know was that her innocent joke, her moment of casual cruelty performed for social media virality, had just set off a chain reaction that would do more than transform Larry's body. It would dismantle her empire. Because Larry wasn't coming back to that showroom alone. And when he returned, it wouldn't just be his appearance that had changed. If you want to see how an invisible janitor became the person who exposed Silicon Valley's most celebrated CEO as a fraud, subscribe now, because what comes next will prove that underestimating someone with nothing left to lose is the most expensive mistake you can make. The search results loaded slowly on Larry's cracked phone screen, but what appeared made his breath catch. Discussion threads on Reddit. Blind posts from anonymous tech workers. A deleted Medium article archived on Wayback Machine. All of them asking the same question: was Neuralink's AI acquisition actually built on real technology, or was it the most expensive scam in Silicon Valley history? Larry scrolled deeper, his janitor's uniform still damp with tears and sweat, and began to piece together a story that Jolie Dooley had spent $4.2 billion trying to bury. But to understand how Larry could even recognize what he was looking at, you need to know who he used to be. Before the mop. Before the night shifts. Before invisibility became his survival strategy. You need to know about Stanford. About the algorithm. About Maya. You need to know how a future tech luminary became a janitor in the first place. The search results glowed on Larry's cracked phone screen at 2 a.m., casting blue light across the cramped studio apartment in East Palo Alto. He sat at the fold-out table that served as his desk, dining area, and laundry sorting station, unable to even think about sleep. His janitor uniform lay crumpled on the floor where he'd dropped it hours ago. He'd moved from his phone to his old laptop, the fan whirring loudly as he opened tab after tab. Forbes profiles. TED Talk videos. Magazine covers. Interview after interview with Jolie Dooley, Silicon Valley's ethical AI pioneer. "I believe technology should serve humanity, not exploit it," she said in a Bloomberg interview from 6 months ago, her platinum bob perfectly styled, her smile radiating manufactured warmth. Larry scrolled through the timeline of her rise. Neuralink Solutions founded in 2018. First prototype demo in 2019. Major contracts announced in 2020. TechVista acquisition for $2.8 billion in 2021. She'd gone from unknown Stanford dropout to billionaire in less than 4 years. Too fast. His PhD training kicked in, the part of his brain that had spent years learning to identify patterns, anomalies, inconsistencies in complex systems. Something about the timeline didn't track. The gap between founding and functioning AI was too narrow. Machine learning algorithms took years of training, testing, refinement. You couldn't rush genuine innovation. He clicked on a Reddit thread from r/machine learning, posted 8 months ago, now locked and deleted but preserved in Google's cache. Anyone else notice Neuralink's demo results can't be replicated? Tried their published parameters. Nothing close to their claimed accuracy. Something's off. The replies had been skeptical, dismissive. Probably user error. They have proprietary modifications. Stop being jealous of success. But one reply from a deleted account stood out. I worked there. You're right to be suspicious. NDA prevents details. But trust your instincts. Larry's heart rate picked up. This wasn't just humiliation speaking. This was his researcher brain recognizing the signature of fraudulent data. He'd seen it before in academic papers, in failed replications, in the gap between what people claimed and what actually worked. He leaned back in his chair, staring at Jolie Dooley's face frozen on his screen mid-TED Talk, and something clicked into place. This is a puzzle, he whispered to the empty apartment. And I know how to solve puzzles. By 3:45 a.m., Larry had made 2 decisions. First, he was going to transform his body, not because Jolie Dooley demanded it, but because he needed to prove to himself that discipline still lived somewhere inside him. Second, he was going to find out the truth about Neuralink, no matter how deep he had to dig. At 4 a.m., he stood outside Iron Haven Gym in the pre-dawn darkness. The gym looked like it had been assembled from spare parts of bankrupt fitness chains. Cracked mirrors, rusty weights, concrete floors, a hand-painted sign that read no excuses, no complaints, just work. The kind of place where serious people came to suffer in productive silence. The door was unlocked. Inside, a man in his mid-50s was setting up equipment, his movements efficient and precise. Military posture. Weathered face. Eyes that had seen things and decided not to talk about them. We're not open yet, the man said without looking up. Are you Coach Raymond Brooks? Now the man looked up. His gaze moved over Larry in a single efficient assessment, taking in the weight, the posture, the exhaustion written into every line of his body. Ray. And you are? Larry Earley. I need your help. Ray set down the weight plate he'd been holding. With what? Larry took a breath. I have 6 months to lose 140 pounds. Ray's expression didn't change. Why? Because someone bet I couldn't. Wrong answer. Ray crossed his arms. Try again. Larry felt something crack open inside his chest. In the last 8 hours, he'd been humiliated, mocked, filmed, and turned into a viral joke. He'd cried in a service corridor and spent the night falling down a research rabbit hole that suggested his humiliation was just the surface of something darker. And this stranger, this ex-military gym owner with hard eyes and no patience for bullshit, was the first person to ask him a real question. Because I want to remember what it feels like to not be invisible, Larry said quietly. Ray studied him for a long moment, then nodded once. I can get you there. But you follow my program to the letter. Every single day. No shortcuts. No excuses. No quitting when it gets hard, and it will get hard. He paused. You ready for that? Yes. Then we start now. The first workout was brutal. Burpees until Larry thought his heart would explode. Kettlebell swings that made his lower back scream. A plank hold that lasted 90 seconds, but felt like 90 hours. Ray didn't offer encouragement or sympathy. He just counted reps and corrected form with a detachment of someone who trained bodies into weapons. By the end, Larry was lying on the concrete floor, drenched in sweat, gasping for air. Ray crouched beside him. We're not just building a body, Early. We're building a weapon. You understand the difference. Larry nodded, unable to speak. Good. See you tomorrow. Same time. Larry drove to Tech Vista for his shift at 10 p.m., his entire body aching in places he'd forgotten existed. But his mind was clear. Focused. The physical transformation was just the cover story. His real mission started tonight. As a night janitor, Larry had access to places no one thought to protect. Empty offices after executives left for the day. E-waste bins filled with hard drives waiting for disposal. Conference rooms where whiteboards still displayed notes from strategy sessions. Server rooms during maintenance hours. The executive floor after security's final sweep. He was invisible, which meant he could see everything. At 11:30 p.m., while emptying a recycling bin in the IT department, Larry found it. An old hard drive labeled Neuralink Beta Tests 2019 in faded Sharpie, tossed in with other outdated equipment. His hands trembled slightly as he slipped it into his maintenance bag. At home, at 3 a.m., after his shift ended, Larry connected the drive to his laptop. The files opened like a confession. Test logs showing failure rates of 73%. Demo videos that crashed after 30 seconds. Email chains between engineers expressing panic about inconsistent results and data that doesn't support claims. A memo from Jolie herself. We go live with the TechVista presentation in 2 weeks regardless. Marketing will smooth over any technical questions. Larry sat back, the blue light of his screen illuminating his face in the darkness. The AI didn't work. It never worked. And if he was finding this in a discarded hard drive, what else was hidden in TechVista's digital graveyard? But he couldn't do this alone. He needed allies. People Jolie had hurt before. People with their own reasons to want the truth exposed. Larry opened a new browser tab and began searching for the ghosts of Neuralink's past. The weapon Ray was building wasn't just physical. It was strategic, methodical, patient. And in 6 months, it would be ready. Larry spent the next 72 hours living in 2 worlds. During the day, he trained with Ray, his body screaming through burpees and kettlebell swings. At night, he cleaned TechVista's floors while his mind cataloged everything he'd found on that discarded hard drive. But in the hours between, in the blue glow of his laptop screen, he hunted for ghosts. The anonymous Reddit post from r/machine learning had become his starting point. Username, Engineers Have Ethics. Posted 8 months ago. Detailed, technical, angry. The kind of post written by someone who knew exactly what they were talking about and couldn't stay silent anymore. Neuralink's published methodology doesn't match their claimed results. I've tried replicating their parameters across 3 different datasets. Nothing even close to their 94% accuracy rate. Either they're using proprietary modifications they're not disclosing, which violates their open source claims, or the results are fabricated. I worked in AI development for 6 years. This smells wrong. Larry traced the digital footprint the way he used to trace algorithmic patterns at Stanford. Cross-referenced the username with other tech forums. Found matching writing style on Hacker News. Then a Glassdoor review from a former senior engineer at Neuralink Solutions, posted around the same time. Toxic culture. Management prioritizes optics over accuracy. Raising concerns about test validity gets you labeled, not a team player. Left before my integrity was completely compromised. The timeline matched. The technical language matched. Larry dug deeper, searching LinkedIn for engineers who'd left Neuralink in late 2021. Found 3 possibilities. Narrowed it down using GitHub contributions and conference speaking history. Keisha Monroe. Lead engineer at Neuralink Solutions from 2019 to 2021. Stanford MS in computer science. Published papers on neural network optimization. Currently listed as independent consultant, which Larry recognized as code for blacklisted and unemployed. He crafted an encrypted message through Proton Mail, brief and direct. I know what happened at Neuralink. I have evidence. We should talk. The janitor from the video. The reply came 18 hours later, Oakland Diner. 22nd and Broadway. Tomorrow. 2 p.m. Come alone. The Oakland Diner was the kind of place where nobody asked questions and the coffee was strong enough to strip paint. Keisha Monroe sat in a corner booth, her back to the wall, a laptop bag at her feet. She was in her early 30s, black woman with natural hair pulled back, eyes that had seen too much corporate warfare. She spotted Larry immediately. You're the janitor from the video. 2 million views now, by the way. Larry slid into the booth across from her. I need evidence that Neuralink's AI never worked. Keisha studied him for a long moment. Why? So you can fit into a suit and marry a billionaire? No. So I can prove she's a fraud. Something shifted in Keisha's expression. She leaned forward. You know what she did to me? I can guess. I was lead engineer. I ran the test protocols. When the results kept failing, I documented everything. Failure rates, error logs, crashed demos. I brought it to Jolie directly. Told her we needed 6 more months of development before going to investors. Keisha's voice went flat. She smiled at me. Said, Keisha, you're thinking like an engineer. Think like an entrepreneur. We don't need perfect. We need fundable. Larry's jaw tightened. I told her that was fraud. She had security escort me out that day. HR called it voluntary resignation. Legal sent an NDA so airtight I can't even tell my mother what happened. And then her PR team started whispering to recruiters that I was technically incompetent and difficult to work with. I've applied to 47 positions in 2 years. Nobody calls back. But you kept the files. Keisha's smile was sharp. Against the NDA. Against legal advice. Against my better judgment. She pulled a thumb drive from her pocket and set it on the table between them. Because I knew this day would come. I knew eventually someone would be brave enough or angry enough to challenge her. Larry picked up the drive. What's on here? Everything. Original test logs. Email chains. Internal memos. Video recordings of demos that crashed. The real data that proves Neuralink's AI has never achieved above 31% accuracy in real-world deployment. Will you testify? If you can protect me from her lawyers, yes. Larry met her eyes. I'm building a case. Not just for me. For everyone she stepped on. Keisha nodded slowly. Then you need to meet Dave Castillo. They met Dave 2 days later at a coffee shop in San Jose, the kind of aggressively hip place with exposed brick and overpriced lattes. Dave Castillo was 41, Latino, wearing a wrinkled button-down that suggested he'd stopped caring about appearances around the same time his life fell apart. Keisha made the introduction. Dave, this is Larry Earley. Larry, Dave co-founded Neuralink with Jolie. Dave's laugh was bitter. Co-founded. That's generous. I built the first prototype. I wrote the initial algorithm. I secured the seed funding for my family's connections. He stirred his coffee with mechanical precision. And Jolie Dooley took credit for all of it. How? Larry asked. Systematically. Strategically. Brilliantly, if I'm being honest. Dave's voice carried grudging admiration mixed with rage. First, she started doing media interviews alone. Solo founder in her TED Talk bio. When I confronted her, she said it was simpler messaging for investors. Then she renegotiated equity structure with the board, diluted my shares. When I fought back, she had lawyers draw up a settlement. $500,000 to walk away quietly and sign an NDA. You took it. I had 2 kids and a mortgage. She had a PR team ready to destroy me. They'd already started planting stories. Technical co-founder can't scale with company growth. Deadweight holding back innovation. Dave's hands trembled slightly. By the time TechVista acquired Neuralink for $2.8 billion, my name had been completely erased. Every article, every interview, every company history. Like I never existed. Larry felt a cold recognition. Erasure. Invisibility. Different method, same result. I have the original documents, Dave continued. Partnership agreements. Early email chains. Founding paperwork with both our names. Proof that she systematically wrote me out of my own company. Will you go public? Dave looked at him with haunted eyes. If it means she finally faces consequences? Absolutely. Keisha leaned forward. There's one more person you need to meet. Dr. Patricia Nguyen's Stanford office was a testament to decades of rigorous research. The walls were covered with published papers, conference posters, and photographs of her with students who'd gone on to change the field of artificial intelligence. She was in her late 50s, Vietnamese American, with gray-streaked hair and eyes that missed nothing. She studied Larry with the same intensity she probably applied to research data. You're the young man from the video. The one Jolie humiliated. Yes, ma'am. And now you want revenge? No, ma'am. I want justice. Pat's expression softened slightly. She gestured to the chairs across from her desk. Larry, Keisha, and Dave sat. Jolie Dooley was my student, Pat began. Brilliant mind. Absolutely brilliant. She could see patterns in data that took others months to recognize. But she had a fundamental ethical flexibility that concerned me from the beginning. She pulled out a file folder, thick with documents. In 2017, Jolie was working in my research lab as a graduate assistant. She had access to proprietary algorithms we'd been developing for 5 years, funded by NSF grants. Research that belonged to the university. Pat's voice went cold. She copied the core algorithm, made minor modifications, and patented it under her own name 6 months before her thesis defense. Larry's stomach dropped. You tried to stop her? I reported it to the university administration. TechVista had just become a major donor. $20 million for a new computer science building. The administration suggested I reconsider my allegations. Pat's smile was thin and sharp. When I didn't, TechVista's legal team sent a letter threatening to sue the university for defamation and tortious interference. The university asked me to sign a statement saying the algorithm was Jolie's original work. Did you? No. But they made it clear my tenure and my lab's funding depended on letting it go. So I documented everything and waited. She pushed the folder across the desk. Original research notes with timestamps. Lab access logs showing when Jolie copied the files. Email chains with university administration. Everything you need to prove the foundation of Neuralink was built on stolen research. Larry looked at the 3 people sitting in that office. An engineer who'd been fired for telling the truth. A business partner who'd been erased from his own company. A professor who'd been silenced by institutional cowardice. And himself, a janitor who'd been mocked on camera for viral entertainment. She doesn't just take credit, Dave said quietly. She erases people. Makes them invisible. Like they never mattered. Until now, Keisha added. Pat folded her hands on her desk. I've been waiting for someone brave enough to challenge her. Someone with nothing to lose and everything to prove. She looked at Larry. I think you might be that person. Larry felt the weight of it settle on his shoulders. This wasn't just about a suit anymore. It wasn't even just about his humiliation. It was about every person Jolie Dooley had stepped on while building her empire of lies. We do this together, Larry said. All of us. Every person she hurt gets their voice back. Keisha nodded. I'm in. Dave exhaled slowly. Me too. Pat's smile was fierce. Then let's bring her down. They spent the next 2 hours in that office, laying out evidence like pieces of a puzzle. Engineering reports. Business documents. Research theft proof. Financial fraud. Together, the picture was devastating. Separately, each piece could be explained away, settled quietly, buried under NDAs and legal threats. But together? Together they were irrefutable. As Larry left Stanford's campus that evening, his phone buzzed with a text from Ray. Where were you? Missed morning training. Larry typed back, building the other weapon. See you tomorrow, 5 a.m. Because physical transformation was just the visible part of what he was doing. The real work was happening in encrypted messages, coffee shop meetings, and document folders passed across desks. The alliance was complete. Engineer plus business partner plus professor plus janitor. 4 invisible people who were about to become impossible to ignore. And in 3 months, At TechVista's annual shareholder gala, Jolie Dooley would finally understand the cost of making people disappear. 6 weeks into Ray's program, Larry stood on the gym scale at 5:47 a.m. and watched the number settle at 305 pounds. 35 pounds gone. His reflection in Iron Haven's cracked mirror showed a face he was beginning to recognize again. Sharper jawline, eyes that didn't look perpetually exhausted, shoulders that no longer slumped under invisible weight. "Good," Ray said, marking the number in his training log. "Right on schedule." But the scale's the least interesting part. Larry turned. "What do you mean?" Ray pointed at the wall where Larry had struggled through his first plank 6 weeks ago. "Go." 2 minutes. Larry dropped into position. His core engaged automatically now, muscle memory replacing the shaking uncertainty of those first sessions. He held it, breathing steady, watching the seconds tick by on the wall clock. At 90 seconds, his abs started burning. At 150, his whole body trembled. But he held. 2 minutes. Ray called time. Larry stood up, sweat dripping, but something else too. Pride. 6 weeks ago, you lasted 45 seconds before collapsing, Ray said. That's the transformation that matters. Not what you weigh. What you can do. The training had become Larry's anchor. Every morning at 5 a.m., before the world woke up, before his night shift ended, he ran through East Palo Alto in the dark. The first week, he'd barely managed half a mile before his lungs gave out. Now he was up to 3 miles, his pace improving each week. Ray's nutrition plan was ruthless in its simplicity. Meal prep every Sunday. Chicken, vegetables, brown rice, measured portions. No exceptions. No cheat days. Discipline isn't something you practice sometimes, Ray had said. It's something you are. The weight training built functional strength, not vanity muscles. Deadlifts. Squats. Pull-ups that Larry had modified with resistance bands until he could finally do one unassisted. His body was becoming a tool, precise and capable. But the mental training was harder. "One more set," Ray would say when Larry thought he had nothing left. "I can't," Larry would gasp. "Pain is temporary. Regret is permanent. One more set." And Larry would find something. Some reserve he didn't know existed. And he'd finish. 2 months in, Maya noticed during one of his hospital visits. She was sitting up in bed, her color better since the new treatment protocol had started working, reading a design magazine. "You look different, big brother," she said, studying him with the artist's eye she'd inherited from their mother. Larry set down the coffee he'd brought her. "Different how?" "Lighter. Not just your body. Your eyes. You're carrying less." She smiled. "It looks good on you." He sat in the chair beside her bed, the same chair he'd occupied for 3 years through chemo sessions and crisis nights and moments when he'd thought he might lose her. "I'm doing something," he said quietly. "Something important." "The suit thing? The challenge?" "It started there. But it's bigger now." Maya reached for his hand. "Good. You've been invisible for too long. Time for people to see you." The other gym members had started noticing too. At first, Larry had been just another struggling newcomer, red-faced and gasping through workouts. But consistency earned respect at Iron Haven. The regulars nodded at him now. A few offered encouragement. One older man, a former boxer, watched Larry finish a brutal circuit and said, "Kid's got something. Doesn't quit." Ray overheard and smiled. "No, he doesn't." But while Larry's body transformed in the harsh fluorescent lights of Iron Haven, his real work happened in the darkness of TechVista's empty offices. His night shift started at 10 p.m. For the first 2 hours, he cleaned public spaces, lobbies, conference rooms, break rooms. Visible work that established his presence, his pattern, his normalcy. Security guards waved him through. Cameras captured him pushing his cart, emptying trash, mopping floors. Just the janitor. Invisible. But from midnight to 4 a.m., when the building was truly empty except for a skeleton security crew monitoring screens in a distant office, Larry became someone else. He'd memorized the security camera blind spots. Knew which offices had motion sensors and which didn't. Understood the building's digital infrastructure better than most of the IT staff because he'd spent 3 years watching, listening, learning. The breakthrough came on a Tuesday night, 3 months into his investigation. Larry was cleaning Jolie's executive office, the enormous corner suite with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Silicon Valley. He'd learned her patterns. She usually left by 8 p.m., sometimes returned briefly around 10 p.m. if she forgot something, then gone for the night. Tonight, she'd left her laptop on the desk. Not closed. Not locked. Open to her email, a video call paused on the screen. Larry's heart hammered. He had maybe 10 minutes before she might return. Maybe less. He pulled out the camera pen Keisha had given him, activated it with a click, and started photographing. Email after email. Cloud storage folders. Shared drives. A folder labeled Legal Shield caught his attention. Inside, settlement agreements with 7 different whistleblowers. Forged performance reviews used to justify terminations. Communication with law firms about reputation management and narrative control. And then the smoking gun. An email thread from 14 months ago, Jolie to TechVista's board of directors. Neuralink performance concerns. We're aware the AI isn't meeting projected benchmarks in real-world deployment. Recommend we focus on managing investor expectations rather than admitting technical shortfalls. The technology doesn't need to work perfectly. It just needs to work long enough for the acquisition to close and stock options to vest. After that, any performance issues can be attributed to integration challenges. Larry's hands trembled as he photographed it from 3 angles, making sure every word was captured clearly. A response from the CFO, legal advises this conversation should happen verbally, not in writing. Jolie's reply, noted. Deleting this thread after you confirm receipt. But she hadn't deleted it. She'd moved it to an archive folder, insurance against the board if they ever turned on her. Larry heard footsteps in the hallway. He closed the laptop exactly as he'd found it, grabbed his cleaning supplies, and was wiping down the desk when Jolie walked in with her phone pressed to her ear. Don't care what the engineers say, we're announcing the expansion on schedule, she was saying. She glanced at Larry without really seeing him, made a vague shooing gesture with her hand. Larry nodded, pushed his cart toward the door, heart pounding so hard he thought she might hear it. Make sure the press release emphasizes our commitment to ethical AI, Jolie continued into her phone, her voice fading as Larry moved into the hallway. That phrase tests well with investors. Larry kept walking, kept his breathing steady, didn't run until he reached the service elevator and the doors closed. Then he leaned against the wall and let out a shaking breath. He had it. The proof. In her own words. Over the next 4 weeks, Larry's after-hours investigation intensified. He found the backup servers in a sub-level storage room that IT used for redundancy. Accessed them during a scheduled maintenance window with credentials he'd found on a sticky note under a desk 3 months ago. Downloaded gigabytes of original Neuralink test data. Failure rates of 73% compared to the publicly claimed 94% success rate. Crashed demos. Error logs that had been scrubbed from current systems but preserved in backups. He discovered a paper trail of payments to tech journalists. 20,000 here, 15,000 there. Always structured as consulting fees or speaking honorariums. Always to writers who subsequently published glowing profiles of Jolie and Neuralink. He found internal memos about suppressing negative coverage, legal threats sent to bloggers who questioned the technology, NDAs that went far beyond protecting trade secrets into territory that looked like witness intimidation. Every night, Larry photographed, downloaded, documented. Then he uploaded everything to encrypted cloud storage with backups in 3 separate locations. He cataloged each piece of evidence with timestamps, sources, chain of custody documentation that would hold up to legal scrutiny. Keisha helped him verify the technical data. Dave cross-referenced the business documents. Pat confirmed the research theft timeline. They communicated through encrypted channels, met in different locations each time, never established a pattern that could be tracked. The war room was Keisha's apartment in Oakland, where they'd covered one wall with a timeline. Evidence arranged chronologically, color-coded by type of fraud. Engineering, financial, legal, research theft, witness tampering. It's comprehensive, Dave said during one late-night session, staring at the wall. Any one of these threads could trigger an investigation. All of them together. It's a RICO case, Pat finished. Racketeering. Organized fraud. Larry stood back, looking at 3 months of work. We need journalists who can't be bought. And we need the SEC positioned to move immediately. I have contacts at TechCrunch and Wired, Keisha said. Real investigative reporters. They've been trying to get sources on Neuralink for years. I can reach out to former board members who left TechVista quietly, Dave added. Some of them suspected but couldn't prove it. They'll talk if we have evidence. Pat nodded. And I can provide academic credibility. Verify the research theft. Confirm the technical impossibility of Neuralink's claimed timeline. Larry pulled out his phone, opened the calendar. TechVista's annual shareholder gala is in 12 weeks. 500 investors, industry press, analysts. Public event, live-streamed. They all understood immediately. Maximum visibility, Keisha said. No way to bury it, Dave added. And the shareholders have a legal right to know if the company they've invested in is built on fraud, Pat finished. Larry looked at his reflection in Keisha's window. 4 months ago, he'd been 340 pounds, invisible, humiliated on camera. Now he was 295 pounds, part of a coordinated investigation, building a case that would dismantle a billionaire's empire. 12 weeks, he said. I need to lose another 50 pounds. We need to finalize the evidence package. And we need to make sure when we go public, it's ironclad. One shot, Keisha said. One shot, Larry agreed. Meanwhile, on social media, #Janitor Challenge continued its strange evolution. The first week, the comments had been brutal. He'll never do it, LMAO. Imagine being that delusional. This is sad. But by week 4, the tone started shifting. Someone had created a Twitter thread tracking Larry's progress, compiling the few photos that existed of him arriving at the gym before dawn. Say what you want, but this guy is actually trying. By week 8, there were think pieces. The problematic viral challenge that reveals Silicon Valley's cruelty. When does a joke become bullying? The janitor who's becoming an inspiration. The comments evolved, actually kind of rooting for him now. He's lost visible weight. This guy is serious. Whether he makes it or not, respect for the effort. Jolie's PR team noticed. The narrative is shifting, they warned in a briefing she mostly ignored. Public sentiment is turning sympathetic to him and critical of you. We should consider a statement. Maybe an apology. Jolie laughed. Apologize? For what? Making a joke? This is Silicon Valley. If you can't handle banter, you don't belong here. But privately, she checked the hashtag more than she wanted to admit. Saw the changing comments. Felt the first small flutter of unease that maybe this had gotten bigger than a moment of casual entertainment. She pushed it away. She had a TED Talk to prepare about authentic leadership in the age of disruption. Magazine covers celebrating her as one of Forbes' most inspiring female CEOs. Stock prices at all-time highs. What did she care about a janitor and a stupid challenge? Larry saw the TED Talk video 3 days after it posted. Watched Jolie stand on that red circle, talking about integrity and innovation, while he sat in his apartment surrounded by evidence of her fraud. The irony was almost beautiful. Soon, he whispered to his laptop screen. Very soon, everyone will know exactly who you are. He closed the video and opened his training log. Tomorrow, 5 miles at dawn. Deadlifts. Pull-ups. Meal prep. And tomorrow night, final server access to retrieve the last pieces of evidence. 12 weeks until the gala. 12 weeks until the world saw the truth. The weapon Ray was building was getting stronger every day. And the weapon Larry was building in the shadows was almost complete. 3 months into the investigation, Larry made a mistake. It was 1:47 a.m. on a Thursday, and he was in Jolie's office for the 3rd time that week. Security had changed shifts at 1:30 a.m., giving him a 20-minute window when the new guard was still doing rounds on the lower floors. He'd accessed her desktop computer using credentials he'd found in an unencrypted IT support ticket, and he was downloading files from a hidden partition labeled Executive Backup, Do Not Delete. The files were gold. Board meeting recordings. Confidential memos about paying off former employees. Communication with TechVista's legal team about managing potential SEC exposure. Larry was so focused on the download progress bar, 83%, 84%, 85%, that he didn't hear the elevator chime down the hall. Didn't hear the footsteps approaching. Didn't hear anything until Jolie's voice cut through his concentration like ice water. "I forgot my phone." Larry's entire body went rigid. The download was at 91%. The computer screen was fully visible from the doorway. His cleaning cart was on the other side of the room, too far to believably claim he was working. He had maybe 3 seconds before she walked in and saw everything. His hand shot to the mouse, muscle memory from years of closing tabs when professors walked by in computer labs. He minimized the download window, closed the file explorer, brought up the screensaver, all in one fluid motion that took less than 2 seconds. Then he grabbed the desk phone and pretended to be examining it, his other hand holding a cleaning cloth. Jolie walked in, and Larry's heart stopped. She was on her cell phone, her voice sharp with irritation. "I don't care what time it is in New York. Wake him up. Tell him if he doesn't have the merger documents ready by morning, he can find another." She stopped mid-sentence, finally noticing Larry. For a terrible moment, their eyes met. Larry held up the desk phone slightly, gestured to it with the cleaning cloth as if checking for dust, his expression carefully blank. Jolie's eyes narrowed. She looked at him, then at her desk, then back at him. Larry's pulse hammered in his ears so loudly he was certain she could hear it. Then she spotted her personal phone on the credenza by the window, grabbed it, and waved him away with an irritated hand gesture. "Out. I need privacy." Larry set down the desk phone, picked up his cleaning supplies with hands that somehow didn't shake, and walked toward the door. Each step felt like walking through concrete. Every instinct screamed at him to run, but running would give him away. As he pushed his cart past her, Jolie was already back on her phone call, pacing by the windows. "The SEC inquiry is just fishing. Our lawyers say they have nothing concrete. It's fine. Everything is fine." Larry made it to the hallway. Made it to the service elevator. Made it inside and pressed the button for the basement. The doors closed. And then his legs nearly gave out. He leaned against the elevator wall, his breathing ragged, his hands finally starting to shake. That was too close. Way too close. When he got home at 5 a.m., he checked his encrypted backup. The download had completed at 97% before he'd closed it. Not everything, but most of it. Including the board recordings. He'd gotten away with it. This time. But the close call rattled him more than he wanted to admit. Jolie was getting nervous about the SEC. Which meant she was paying more attention. Which meant he needed to be more careful. Or faster. He had 9 weeks until the gala. 9 weeks to finish gathering evidence without getting caught. Larry barely slept that day. He made it to Ray's gym at 4:30 p.m. for an evening session, his body exhausted, his mind racing. "You're distracted," Ray observed, watching Larry's form falter during deadlifts. "What's going on?" "Nothing. Just tired." "Bullshit." Ray crossed his arms. "You don't get to lie to me. Not in my gym. What happened?" Larry set down the barbell. And maybe because he was exhausted, or maybe because he needed someone to know the full truth, he told Ray everything. The investigation. The evidence. The close call last night. Ray listened without interrupting. When Larry finished, Ray was quiet for a long moment. "You're playing a dangerous game," he finally said. She's a billionaire with unlimited resources and lawyers who specialize in destroying people. If she catches you. I know. Do you? Ray's voice was hard. Because from where I'm standing, you're risking everything. Your job. Your sister's health insurance. Maybe even criminal charges if they spin it right. I know, Larry repeated. But I can't stop now. Not when I'm this close. Ray studied him. This isn't about the suit anymore, is it? It never was. Then what's it about? Larry met his eyes. It's about every person who's ever been made invisible. Every person who's been stepped on by someone with power who thought there would be no consequences. His voice dropped. It's about making sure that for once, just once, the person who did the stepping actually falls. Ray nodded slowly. Okay. But you need to be smarter. No more close calls. You get caught, this whole thing ends before it starts. I will be. Good. Ray pointed back at the barbell. Now give me 3 more sets. Clean form. If you're going to take down a billionaire, you need to be strong enough to handle whatever comes next. The call came at 2:17 p.m. the next day. Larry was sleeping after his night shift when his phone rang, Maya's name on the screen. He answered immediately, already sitting up, knowing that she only called during the day if something was wrong. Larry. Her voice was weak, strained. I'm at the hospital. There's a problem. He was dressed and in his car in under 3 minutes, breaking every speed limit between East Palo Alto and Stanford Medical Center. His mind cycled through every terrible possibility. Relapse. Infection. Organ failure. Maya was in the ICU, behind glass, tubes and monitors surrounding her. A doctor Larry didn't recognize met him in the hallway. Mr. Earley, I'm Dr. Patel. Your sister developed a severe infection, likely due to her compromised immune system from the chemotherapy. Her white blood cell count is dangerously low. We've started aggressive antibiotic treatment, but the next 48 hours are critical. The world tilted. Is she going to die? We're doing everything we can. But you should prepare yourself that this is very serious. They let him sit beside her bed, masked and gloved, watching machines breathe for her. Maya was unconscious, her face slack, her skin ashen. So different from the vibrant young woman who'd noticed his transformation just weeks ago. Larry held her hand through the latex glove and felt something inside him crack open. What am I doing? He whispered. You need me here, not chasing revenge against a billionaire who doesn't even know I exist. You need me present, not spending every night breaking into offices and collecting evidence. Maya didn't answer. Couldn't answer. The ventilator hissed steadily. Larry put his head down on the edge of her bed and for the first time since the night of his humiliation, let himself cry. Not angry tears. Not determined tears. Just exhausted, terrified, helpless tears. That's where Ray found him 6 hours later. The former Army Ranger walked into the ICU like he owned the place, somehow convincing the nurses to let him through. He stood in the doorway for a moment, taking in the scene, then pulled up a chair beside Larry. Keisha called me, Ray said quietly. Told me what happened. Larry didn't lift his head. I can't do this, Ray. I can't lose her. Not for this. Not for anything. No. You can't. And you won't. How do you know? Because she's young and she's strong and she's got the best medical team in the state. Ray's voice was firm, certain. And because she's got you. Which means she's got every reason to fight. But what if? No what ifs. You don't get to live in hypotheticals. You live in what you can control. Ray leaned forward. You asked me earlier what you're doing. Why you're chasing this investigation. You want to know what I think. Larry finally looked up. I think this isn't revenge. It's justice. And I think Maya needs you to finish it. How can you say that? She's dying and I'm... She's fighting, Ray interrupted. And you taught her how to fight by doing it yourself. You think she wants you to give up now? To let that woman win because things got hard? Larry looked back at Maya's still form. What if I'm just being selfish? What if I'm doing this for my ego and not? Stop. Ray's voice cut through the spiral. I've trained a lot of people. I can tell the difference between ego and purpose. You're not doing this to feel big. You're doing this because it's right. Because someone has to. And because you're the only one who can. They sat in silence for a while, the machines beeping steadily. Finally, Ray stood. I'm going to get us coffee. You're going to stay here as long as she needs you. And when she wakes up, not if when, you're going to tell her you're not giving up. Because that's what she would want. Dr. Patel came by at midnight with an update. The antibiotics are working. Her white count is stabilizing. She's not out of danger yet, but she's fighting. By morning, Maya opened her eyes. Larry was there, hadn't left, his hand still holding hers. Hey, she whispered, her voice raspy from the breathing tube they'd removed an hour earlier. Hey yourself. Larry's voice cracked. You scared the hell out of me. Sorry. She managed a weak smile. Habit. Don't do it again. She squeezed his hand with what little strength she had. The challenge. The suit. Are you still doing it? Larry hesitated. Maya, I don't. Don't stop because of me. Her eyes, though tired, were fierce. Don't you dare stop because of me. But you need. I need my brother to show the world who he really is, Maya said. I need you to prove that we don't disappear just because someone powerful decides we should. I need you to finish what you started. Tears ran down Larry's face. I almost lost you. But you didn't. I'm here. I'm fighting. And so are you. She took a shaky breath. Finish it, Larry. For both of us. The doctor appeared with new information later that day. We're starting a new treatment protocol. It's experimental, just approved by the FDA last month. Significantly more effective for cases like your sister's, but also significantly more expensive. Larry's stomach dropped. How expensive? The initial treatment course runs about $180,000. Your insurance through TechVista should cover most of it, but there will be substantial out-of-pocket costs. The bitter irony hit Larry like a physical blow. Jolie Dooley's company, built on fraud, maintained through lies, was paying for the treatment that would save his sister's life. He was fighting to destroy the system that was keeping Maya alive. But he couldn't stop now. Not when he was this close. Do whatever you need to do, Larry told the doctor. Cost doesn't matter. Save her. 5 days later, Maya was stable enough to move out of ICU. The new treatment was working. Her color returned. Her strength slowly rebuilt. Larry visited every day, but he also returned to his training. Returned to his investigation. The alliance met at Keisha's apartment 1 week after Maya's crisis. They'd given Larry space during the emergency, but now the clock was ticking. 7 weeks until the gala. The war room had expanded. Evidence covered 2 walls now, organized into categories with color-coded strings connecting related documents like a conspiracy theorist's dream board. Except this conspiracy was real and they had the proof. How's Maya? Keisha asked when Larry arrived. Fighting. Winning. Larry set down his bag. And she told me not to stop. So I'm not stopping. Dave spread out a new set of documents on the table. I got in touch with 3 former TechVista board members who left quietly in the last year. They suspected something was wrong but couldn't prove it. When I showed them what we have, they agreed to provide testimony. Pat added her contribution. I've coordinated with 2 investigative journalists at The Verge and TechCrunch. They've been working parallel investigations for months, but couldn't get sources on record. They're ready to publish the day of the gala, once we go public. Keisha pulled up a digital presentation. I've verified all the technical data. Failure rates, test results, error logs. It's all authentic. Any expert witness will confirm Neuralink's AI never achieved the claimed performance metrics. Larry opened his laptop and added his latest findings. I got the last piece 3 days ago. Audio recording from an executive meeting, recovered from the building's security system backup. Jolie's voice, clearly discussing destroying evidence and paying off witnesses. They all stared at the accumulated evidence. This is enough to trigger a federal investigation, Dave said quietly. It's enough to destroy her, Pat added. It's enough to get justice, Keisha finished. Larry looked around at these 3 people who become his allies, his team, his friends. An engineer who'd lost her career. A business partner who'd been erased from history. A professor who'd been silenced by institutional cowardice. And him. The invisible janitor. 7 weeks, he said. We coordinate everything. The evidence presentation, the media, the SEC tip-off. We get one shot at this. It has to be perfect. What about security? Dave asked. She'll have her lawyers there. TechVista security. The moment you start revealing evidence, they'll try to shut it down. I have a share certificate, Larry said. 1 share of TechVista stock I bought last month. Shareholders have a legal right to speak at the annual meeting. They can try to shut me down, but it'll be recorded, live-streamed, and witnessed by 500 people. Too public to bury. And if her lawyers go after you afterward? Pat asked. Let them try. Everything I have is documented, sourced, and backed up in 6 different locations. I didn't steal anything. I found discarded evidence and reported fraud. That's protected under whistleblower statutes. Keisha pulled up the event details. Moscone Center. May 15th. 7 p.m. start time. Jolie gives the opening address, then shareholder Q&A, then award ceremony. That's our window. They assigned roles. Keisha would handle technical support, controlling the presentation system to prevent shutdown. Dave would position himself among the investors to provide real-time verification of business documents. Pat would be ready to confirm research theft and provide academic credibility. Larry would deliver the evidence and confront Jolie. And they'd arranged for Maya to attend, if she was strong enough. She wanted to be there, wanted to see the woman who'd humiliated her brother face the consequences. Ray had insisted on coming too. I started this journey with you. I'm seeing it through. We also need contingency plans, Dave said, ever the careful businessman. What if she tries to settle before we go public? What if she offers you money to walk away? Larry's expression hardened. There's no amount of money that makes this go away. This isn't about me anymore. It's about everyone she's hurt. What if she threatens Maya? Your job? Your future? She can't threaten what I'm willing to lose. Larry looked at each of them. I've spent 3 years being invisible. Being nothing. Being someone who doesn't matter. The only thing I'm afraid of now is going back to that. And this, he gestured to the evidence wall, this makes sure I never have to. They worked until 3 a.m., refining the plan, anticipating problems, building backup strategies. When Larry finally left Keisha's apartment, the sun was starting to rise. He had just enough time to drive to Iron Haven for morning training. Ray was already there, setting up equipment. How'd it go? Ray asked. We're ready. 7 weeks. And you? Are you ready? Larry thought about Maya, fighting in a hospital bed. About Keisha, blacklisted and unemployed. About Dave, erased from his own company. About Pat, silenced by institutional fear. About himself, 3 years of invisibility, 3 years of swallowing humiliation, 3 years of watching his dreams deferred. Yes, Larry said. I'm ready. Good. Ray pointed to the treadmill. Then run. 5 miles. And think about what you're going to say when you're standing on that stage in front of 500 people and the woman who humiliated you. Larry ran. And with every step, every breath, every mile, he rehearsed the words that would bring down an empire. 7 weeks. 1 shot. Everything had to be perfect. Because this time, the Invisible Man would make damn sure everyone was watching. 5 months into Ray's program, Larry stepped on the scale and watched the digital readout settle at 210 pounds. 130 pounds gone. He stood in front of Iron Haven's cracked mirror and barely recognized the man staring back. The transformation wasn't just physical, though his body had been completely rebuilt, lean muscle replacing years of accumulated weight. It was deeper than that. His posture was different. Shoulders back, spine straight, chin level. The perpetual slouch of someone trying to take up less space had been replaced by the bearing of someone who'd earned his presence. His eyes were different too. Sharper. Focused. The exhausted, beaten-down look had been replaced by something harder. More dangerous. Ray stood behind him, arms crossed, studying his work. 142 pounds, he said quietly. 12 more than your target. I know. How do you feel? Larry turned from the mirror. Like I'm not invisible anymore. Ray's weathered face creased into something that might have been a smile. You did something most people never do. You became who you said you'd be. He paused. But you know the physical part was the easy part, right? Yeah. The hard part comes in 2 weeks when you're standing on that stage and everyone's watching. Larry nodded. I know. You ready for that? Larry thought about the evidence package, now complete and verified. About the alliance, each person prepared for their role. About Maya, responding so well to treatment that her doctors were cautiously using the word remission. About 3 years of being invisible, of mopping floors where his research had once been discussed, of swallowing humiliation so his sister could live. Yes, he said. I'm ready. Ray pulled a garment bag from his office. Then try this on. Inside was a Tom Ford suit. Not the original $45,000 one from the display, but a borrowed version in the same size and cut. Ray had called in a favor from a former trainee who worked in luxury retail. Larry changed in Iron Haven's bathroom, the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. The suit fit perfectly. Charcoal gray, razor-sharp lines, tailored for the body he built over 5 months of brutal discipline. He walked back out to where Ray was waiting. The former Army Ranger studied him for a long moment, then nodded once. That's the weapon we built. Larry looked at his reflection again. The suit transformed him, but not in the way Jolie Dooley had intended when she'd made her cruel joke. It didn't make him worthy. It didn't give him value. It just revealed what had been there all along. I'm not invisible anymore, Larry said again, quieter this time. No, Ray agreed. You're not. While Larry's physical transformation reached its completion, the final pieces of evidence fell into place. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Jamal Washington had been a security guard at TechVista for 8 years. Larry had shared break room conversations with him during quiet 3 a.m. shifts, the kind of casual friendship that develops between people who work while the rest of the world sleeps. 3 weeks before the gala, Jamal asked Larry to stay after his shift. They met in the parking garage, Jamal's eyes scanning for cameras. My daughter worked in TechVista's marketing department, Jamal said without preamble. Smart girl. Full scholarship to Berkeley. First person in our family to graduate college. Larry waited. Last year, she questioned some of the claims in a Neuralink press release. Said the performance metrics didn't match the beta test results she'd seen. Her supervisor told her to leave it alone. Jamal's jaw tightened. She didn't. She went to HR. 2 weeks later, she was fired for cultural misalignment. Escorted out by security. By me. Jamal, I'm sorry. They blacklisted her. Same as they've done to others. She can't get hired anywhere in tech. She's working retail now, $60,000 in student loans, degree she can't use. Jamal met Larry's eyes. I know what you're doing. I've watched you. I know you're not just cleaning. Larry's pulse quickened. I don't know what. Yes, you do. And I want to help. Jamal pulled out a key card. Executive server room. I can get you in during tomorrow night's system maintenance window. 1 hour, no cameras, no questions. Why would you risk that? Because my daughter deserves better. Because all the people Jolie Dooley stepped on deserve better. And because I've spent 8 years watching and doing nothing. Jamal pressed the keycard into Larry's hand. 1 hour. Make it count. The next night, at 2:17 a.m., Larry entered the executive server room with Jamal's keycard. The space was climate-controlled, racks of servers humming quietly, status lights blinking in the darkness. He connected his laptop to the backup system, navigating through layers of security with credentials he'd accumulated over months of careful observation. And there it was. The complete backup archive. 437 documents proving systematic fraud. Email chains showing coordination between Jolie, her lawyers, and the board to hide Neuralink's failures. Financial records of payments to journalists, analysts, and former employees. Audio recordings from executive meetings where they explicitly discussed destroying evidence. The smoking gun was a video recording from a board meeting 6 months ago. Jolie's face filled the frame, her expression cold and calculating. We have a potential SEC inquiry forming. Here's how we handle it. Destroy any physical documentation of test failures, scrub the servers of original data, and offer settlements to anyone who might talk. The cost of covering this up is significantly less than the cost of exposure. One board member objected, that's obstruction of justice. Jolie's smile was sharp. It's only obstruction if they can prove what we destroyed. And they can't prove what doesn't exist anymore. Larry downloaded everything. The entire archive. 6 years of fraud, corruption, and systematic abuse of power. By the time he left the server room 58 minutes later, he had enough evidence to trigger not just an SEC investigation, but potential criminal charges for fraud, witness tampering, and obstruction of justice. Jamal was waiting in the hallway. You get what you needed? More than I needed. Good. Jamal took back the keycard. My daughter's name is Alicia Washington. When this comes out, make sure people know what happened to her. Make sure they know she tried to do the right thing. I will, Larry promised. I'll make sure everyone knows. The Alliance's final meeting happened at Keisha's apartment on a Sunday afternoon, 10 days before the gala. The war room had evolved into a comprehensive evidence package. Every document cataloged, every audio file transcribed, every video clip time-stamped and verified. They'd organized it into 5 categories: technical fraud, financial fraud, research theft, witness intimidation, and obstruction of justice. 3 investigative journalists had been given embargoed access to preview the evidence. Sarah Chun from TechCrunch, Marcus Rodriguez from Wired, and Jennifer Okafor from The Verge. All 3 confirmed they were ready to publish comprehensive exposés the moment Larry went public at the gala. The SEC has been anonymously tipped, Dave reported. They'll have investigators in attendance, positioned to move immediately once evidence is presented publicly. Pat had coordinated with Stanford's legal counsel. The university is prepared to file a lawsuit for research theft. They've been waiting for someone to break the story so they could move without TechVista's legal threats. Keisha pulled up the technical specs for the Moscone Center's presentation system. I can access their network remotely. The moment you're ready to present evidence, I'll push it to every screen in the venue. They can cut your microphone, but they can't stop 500 people from seeing the documents. Larry reviewed his speaking notes for the 100th time. He'd rehearsed the presentation until he could deliver it in his sleep. Calm, factual, devastating. What about security? Dave asked. The moment you start, they'll try to remove you from the stage. Let them try, Larry said. I'm a shareholder. I have legal standing to speak. Any attempt to silence me will be recorded and live-streamed. It'll look like exactly what it is, suppression of whistleblowing. Maya called on video from her apartment. She'd been released from the hospital 3 days ago, still weak but recovering. I'm coming, she said before anyone could object. I'll be in a wheelchair if I have to, but I'm coming. Maya. Don't. You've been fighting for me for 3 years. I'm not missing the moment you fight for yourself. Her smile was fierce despite her pallor. Besides, I want to see her face when she realizes the janitor she mocked just destroyed everything she built. Ray spoke up from where he'd been listening quietly. I'll be there too. Front row. You're going to look out at that crowd, and you're going to see people who believe in you. Remember that when it gets hard. They ran through the plan one more time. Every contingency accounted for. Every risk assessed. Every backup strategy prepared. At the end, they all stood looking at the evidence wall. 5 months of work, documented trauma, systematic abuse, and incontrovertible proof. This is going to change everything, Pat said quietly. TechVista's stock will crash. Jobs will be lost. There will be collateral damage. I know, Larry said. You ready for that responsibility? Larry thought about Alicia Washington, blacklisted for telling the truth. About Keisha, fired and silenced. About Dave, erased from his own company's history. About Pat, threatened into silence by institutional cowardice. About every person who'd been stepped on by someone with power who thought there would be no consequences. The damage already happened, he said. We're just making it visible. The week before the gala passed in a strange blur. Larry maintained his routine, training with Ray every morning, visiting Maya in the afternoons, working his night shift at TechVista, maintaining the cover, staying invisible just a little bit longer. On Tuesday night, he was cleaning the executive floor when Jolie emerged from her office, jacket over her arm, phone pressed to her ear. She almost walked past him. Then she did a double take. Her eyes narrowed. She lowered her phone slightly. Wait. You look familiar. Larry kept pushing his cleaning cart, head down. Just the help, ma'am. Jolie studied him, her brilliant mind working. No, seriously. Have we met before? Larry's heart pounded, but he kept his voice steady, slightly deferential. I've worked here for 3 years, ma'am. You probably see me around. She stepped closer, her eyes traveling over his face, his build. He'd lost so much weight, changed so completely, that recognition was fighting its way through her dismissive assumptions. You really do look, she shook her head, dismissing it. Smiled that cold smile. Never mind. You all look the same in those uniforms anyway. She walked away, already back on her phone call. Larry stood very still for a moment, hands gripping the cart handle. 1 week, he whispered to the empty hallway. 7 more days of being invisible. The Alliance had their final coordination meeting on Thursday night. Keisha confirmed remote access to the Moscone Center systems. Dave positioned former board members ready to verify documents. Pat had academic experts on standby. The journalists had their stories ready to publish. The SEC investigators had been provided anonymous previews of evidence and would be stationed in the audience. Everything was aligned. Last chance to back out, Dave said, looking at Larry. Once you step on that stage, there's no going back. She'll come after you with everything she has. Let her come, Larry said. I have the truth. What does she have? Money, lawyers, power, connections. All built on lies that are about to be exposed. Larry looked around at his team. We're not backing out. We're finishing this. They spent the night rehearsing timing, reviewing contingencies, preparing for every scenario they could imagine. By the time Larry left at 3 a.m., he felt the strange calm that comes before a storm. Everything that could be prepared had been prepared. Now it was just a matter of execution. He drove to Iron Haven for one last early morning session. Ray was already there, as always. Tomorrow night, Ray said. It wasn't a question. Tomorrow night, Larry confirmed. They didn't talk during the workout. Just moved through the routine they'd built together over 5 months. Larry ran 5 miles without stopping. Did pull-ups he couldn't have imagined attempting when he'd first walked through Iron Haven's doors. Lifted weights that would have crushed him back then. When they finished, Ray put a hand on Larry's shoulder. I've trained a lot of people, he said. SEALs. Rangers. Professional athletes. But I've never been more proud of anyone than I am of you right now. Larry's throat tightened. I couldn't have done this without you. Yeah, you could have. I just gave you the structure. You did the work. Ray's grip tightened. Tomorrow night, when you're up there and it gets hard, because it will get hard, remember that you've already done the hardest part. You've already become someone new. The rest is just showing the world what you built. That afternoon, Larry visited Maya at her apartment. She'd set up her design portfolio on the coffee table, applications to fashion programs spread out around her laptop. Her hair was growing back, still short but healthy. Her color had returned. The doctors were using words like full remission and long-term prognosis. They ordered Thai food and ate on her tiny balcony, watching the sun set over East Palo Alto. Are you scared? Maya asked. Terrified, Larry admitted. Good. Means you know how important this is. She set down her pad thai. Whatever happens tomorrow, I want you to know something. You saved my life. Not just by keeping me alive with insurance and hospital visits. By showing me that fighting matters. That we don't have to accept being invisible just because someone powerful decides we should be. Maya. Let me finish. Her eyes were fierce. You spent 3 years putting your life on hold for me. Tomorrow, you get your life back. And you help everyone else get theirs back too. That's not revenge, Larry. That's justice. Don't forget that when they try to make you feel guilty for what you're doing. They sat in comfortable silence as the sky turned from orange to purple to deep blue. I love you, big brother, Maya said quietly. I love you too. The night before the gala, Larry couldn't sleep. He lay in his cramped studio apartment, staring at the ceiling, running through the presentation one more time in his mind. At 2 a.m., he gave up on sleep and opened his laptop. The hashtag Janitor Challenge hashtag had evolved dramatically over 5 months. What started as mockery had transformed into something else entirely. People were invested now, tracking his progress, rooting for him. The latest trending thread, tomorrow is the TechVista Gala. Tomorrow we find out if the janitor fits the suit. Honestly, at this point, I don't even care about the suit. I just want to see him walk in there with his head high after everything. That would be victory enough. Another comment with thousands of likes, plot twist, he doesn't fit the suit, but he shows up anyway and tells that CEO exactly where she can shove her challenge. That would be legendary. If they only knew what was actually about to happen. Larry closed the laptop and pulled out the Tom Ford suit Ray had borrowed for him. Ran his hand over the fabric. 5 months ago, this had seemed impossible. A goal so distant it might as well have been on another planet. Now it was just fabric. Well-made fabric, but just fabric nonetheless. The suit didn't matter. It never had. What mattered was standing on that stage and proving that character couldn't be measured in thread count or price tags. That justice was more powerful than money. That invisible people could choose to be seen. Larry hung the suit carefully on his closet door and finally fell into a restless sleep. When his alarm went off at 6 a.m. on the day of the gala, he woke with absolute clarity. This was it. One shot. Everything had to be perfect. Larry spent the morning in careful preparation. Shower. Shave. Hair trimmed. The physical ritual of preparing for battle. He put on the suit at 5 p.m. Stood in front of his bathroom mirror and saw a stranger. No, saw himself. His real self. The person he'd been building toward for 5 months. His phone buzzed with messages. From Ray, see you there. Front row. Make me proud. From Keisha, systems are ready. I have control. Let's do this. From Dave, board members positioned. Journalists confirmed. It's happening. From Pat, truth always wins eventually. Today, we make it happen faster. From Maya, go show them who you are, big brother. I'll be watching. From Jamal, for Alicia. For everyone they silenced. Make them hear us. Larry took one last look at his apartment. The cramped space that had been his home during 3 years of invisibility. After tonight, everything would change. He picked up his phone, opened the encrypted folder containing 5 months of evidence, and backed it up one final time. Then he drove to the Moscone Center in San Francisco, where 500 people were gathering to celebrate TechVista's success. Where Jolie Dooley would give a speech about authentic leadership while her empire prepared to crumble. Where the invisible janitor would finally be seen. The weapon was ready. The evidence was complete. The alliance was positioned. And Larry Earley, 210 pounds, 5 months transformed, 3 years patient, was about to remind Silicon Valley that the people you step on while climbing can choose when to pull you back down. The gala was about to begin. And nothing would ever be the same. The Moscone Center glowed like a temple to Silicon Valley excess. Larry parked 3 blocks away and walked toward the venue, his Tom Ford suit drawing admiring glances from passers-by who had no idea they were looking at the subject of a viral challenge that had captivated millions. The building's glass facade reflected the setting sun, bathing everything in gold light. Luxury cars lined the valet area, Teslas, Maseratis, a Bentley. Men in custom tuxedos and women in designer gowns streamed through the entrance, champagne already flowing in the lobby. This was TechVista's moment of triumph. Stock price at an all-time high. Neuralink contracts with Fortune 500 companies announced just last week. Jolie Dooley on the cover of 3 magazines this month alone, crowned as tech's visionary leader. They had no idea the foundation was about to crack. Larry checked his phone one last time. Messages from the alliance confirming positions. Keisha, I'm in the control booth. Have access to all AV systems. Ready when you are. Dave, sitting with the institutional investors. 3 former board members confirmed in attendance. Pat, academic verification team standing by. Press credentials confirmed. Ray, front row center. Look for me when you need strength. Maya, inaccessible seating, left side. Wheelchair and all. I'm here, Larry. Do this. Larry took a deep breath and walked through the entrance. The main ballroom was spectacular. Crystal chandeliers hung from 30-foot ceilings. Ice sculptures shaped like circuit boards lined the perimeter. Champagne fountains bubbled at stations throughout the room. 500 guests in their finest, the elite of Silicon Valley, mingling beneath screens showing TechVista's stock price climbing in real time. At the front of the room, a stage had been erected with podium, microphone, and massive LED screens. And there, displayed on a raised platform like a museum piece, was the Tom Ford suit. Spotlit, pristine, a symbol of executive excellence. The same suit that had been used to humiliate him 5 months ago. Larry scanned the crowd and found his people. Ray sat front row center, his former Army Ranger bearing making him stand out among the tech executives. He wore his dress uniform, chest decorated with medals, and when his eyes met Larry's, he gave the smallest nod of acknowledgement. Maya was in the accessible seating section on the left, her wheelchair parked at the end of a row. She looked pale but determined, her eyes bright with fierce pride. When she saw Larry, she pressed her hand to her heart, their private signal. Dave Castillo had positioned himself among a cluster of gray-haired men in expensive suits, the institutional investors who controlled millions in TechVista stock. Larry recognized 2 of the former board members Dave had mentioned, their faces carefully neutral but watchful. Pat sat with a group that had the unmistakable look of academics and journalists. Larry spotted the press badges, TechCrunch, Wired, The Verge, and others he didn't recognize but guessed were the financial reporters who covered tech stocks. And there, near the front but partially obscured by a structural column, he spotted 2 people who looked distinctly out of place among the Silicon Valley elite. Older, wearing conservative suits, with the watchful eyes of law enforcement. The SEC investigators. Everything was in position. Larry checked his watch, 6:47 p.m. The gala was scheduled to start at 7 p.m. sharp with Jolie's opening address. He moved through the crowd, accepting a champagne flute from a passing waiter purely as camouflage. People looked at him with mild interest. Well-dressed man, fit, confident bearing, but no recognition. Why would they recognize the janitor? Janitors were invisible. Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats. We'll begin in 5 minutes. The crowd began flowing toward the rows of chairs facing the stage. Larry positioned himself in the back, near the center aisle. He needed to be close enough to reach the stage quickly, but far enough back to avoid immediate security attention. His phone buzzed. "Keisha, I see you. Southwest corner, gray suit. Ready when you are." Larry didn't look toward the control booth. Just slipped his phone back into his pocket and watched the room settle. At precisely 7 p.m., the lights dimmed. The LED screens flared to life with the TechVista logo, accompanied by soaring orchestral music that would have been more appropriate for a movie premiere than a shareholder meeting. A hype video began playing. Jolie Dooley's greatest hits, TED Talks, magazine covers, product launches. Her voice narrating over dramatic visuals. Innovation isn't just about technology. It's about having the courage to reimagine what's possible. To push boundaries. To lead with authenticity. The irony was suffocating. The video ended with thunderous applause. Then the announcer's voice boomed through the sound system. "Please welcome TechVista's CEO and the visionary behind Neuralink AI, Jolie Dooley." Jolie emerged from stage left to a standing ovation. She wore a custom Armani gown in deep emerald that probably cost more than Larry used to make in a year. Her platinum bob was styled to perfection, catching the spotlights as she walked. Ice blue eyes scanning the crowd with practiced warmth. The smile of someone who believed she'd already won. She stepped to the podium, waited for the applause to die down, and began. "Thank you. Thank you so much. What an incredible year it's been." Her voice was smooth, confident, commanding. This was her element. Her stage. Her audience. "When I founded Neuralink 6 years ago, I had a vision. Artificial intelligence that would serve humanity, not exploit it. Technology built on ethical foundations, transparent processes, and authentic leadership." Larry's jaw tightened. Every word was a lie wrapped in progressive language. "Today, I'm proud to announce that Neuralink AI has secured contracts with 17 Fortune 500 companies. Our technology is being used in healthcare, education, financial services, all while maintaining the highest standards of accuracy and ethical deployment." The crowd applauded. The stock price on the side screens ticked upward. But numbers and contracts aren't what matter most. What matters is the culture we've built. A culture of innovation, yes, but also of integrity. Of holding ourselves accountable. Of authentic leadership in an industry that too often prioritizes profit over principle. She paused for effect, her smile widening. Some of you may have seen a viral video from 6 months ago. A moment that became, shall we say, an unexpected cultural phenomenon. Nervous laughter rippled through the crowd. People shifted in their seats, unsure where this was going. I made a challenge to someone. A joke, really. But what started as a light-hearted moment became something that taught me an important lesson about the power of visibility. About how we see or don't see the people around us. Larry's hands clenched. She was trying to co-opt it. Turn his humiliation into her redemption story. I don't know if that person is here tonight. I don't know if they took up the challenge. But if they are, I want to say something publicly. Jolie looked directly into the camera, her expression carefully crafted for sincerity. "I'm sorry. That moment wasn't my finest. And regardless of the outcome, I hope we can all learn from it. Learn to see each other. To recognize that everyone deserves respect, regardless of their position." The crowd applauded, charmed by what they perceived as humility. Phones were out, recording this moment for social media. #JolieApology started trending immediately. Larry felt rage boiling in his chest. She was doing it again. Taking something real, his pain, his journey, and turning it into content for her personal brand. But this time, he wasn't going to stay silent. This time, everyone would see. Jolie continued her speech, moving into quarterly earnings, growth projections, strategic initiatives. The LED screens showed graphs and charts, all trending upward. TechVista's success story, told in data points and stock prices. And now, before we move to the award ceremony, we'll open the floor to shareholder questions. As always, TechVista believes in transparency and open dialogue. Larry stood up. The movement caught attention. Heads turned. Whispers started. He stepped into the center aisle and began walking toward the stage. Jolie's speech faltered mid-sentence. With all of our stakeholders. More heads turning. Phones rising. The whispers growing louder. Someone near the front gasped. Wait, is that? Oh my God, it's him. The janitor guy. Holy shit, he actually came. Larry walked steadily down the center aisle, his eyes locked on Jolie's face, watching recognition fight its way through her polished composure. Her expression went through rapid changes. Confusion, recognition, disbelief, then something like panic before her media training reasserted control. You. She breathed into the microphone, the word echoing through the ballroom. Larry reached the front of the room, standing at the base of the stage stairs. 500 people watching. Cameras recording. The moment crystallizing. Ms. Dooley, his voice rang out clear and strong. 6 months ago, you said if I could fit into that suit, you'd marry me. He gestured toward the Tom Ford display, spotlit on its pedestal. I'd like to try it on now. The ballroom went completely silent. You could have heard a pin drop in that massive space. Every eye fixed on Larry and Jolie. Every phone recording. The live stream numbers skyrocketing as word spread across social media. Jolie recovered quickly, her years of public speaking kicking in. She forced a smile, playing to the crowd. Well, this is certainly unexpected. And adorable, really. But as you can see, we're in the middle of an official shareholder meeting. This is a corporate event, not a... Actually, Larry interrupted, his voice calm but carrying authority. This is a public shareholder meeting of a publicly traded company. And I'm a shareholder. He pulled a share certificate from his inner jacket pocket and held it up. The LED screens caught it, displaying it for everyone to see. 1 share of TechVista stock, purchased 4 weeks ago, certificated and official. Which means I have a legal right to be here. And a legal right to address this meeting. Nervous laughter scattered through the crowd. Some of the investors actually looked intrigued. This was better than the scripted corporate theater they'd expected. One called out, "Let him speak." Another, "Come on, Jolie. You made the challenge public." Jolie's smile was starting to crack at the edges. Her eyes darted to her security team, positioned around the perimeter of the room. They moved slightly closer but hesitated. Too many cameras. Too much attention. Removing him would look exactly like what it was, censorship. "Security," she started. "Before I try on the suit," Larry said, cutting through her words, his voice projecting to every corner of the ballroom, "I think these shareholders deserve to know what they're really investing in." He nodded toward the back of the room, toward where Keisha was waiting in the control booth. "What are you?" Jolie began. Too late. The LED screens flickered. Jolie's presentation disappeared, replaced by new content. Financial documents filled the screens. Test results. Email chains. Official Neuralink reports with Jolie's signature. The crowd gasped collectively. Larry's voice remained calm, factual, devastating. Neuralink's AI has a failure rate of 73% in real-world deployment. The first document zoomed in, showing test results, error rates, crashed demos. Official data with TechVista timestamps and digital signatures. Despite publicly claiming 94% accuracy, internal documents show the technology has never achieved above 31% success in actual use. More documents cycled across the screens. The crowd was rivaling now, investors leaning forward, journalists typing furiously, phones recording every second. Jolie's face went from pale to crimson. "This is fabricated. Deep fakes." She turned to her legal team rushing toward the stage. "He's just a janitor with a grudge." Actually, a voice rang out from the academic section. "Dr." Patricia Nguyen stood, her credentials displayed on her phone, held high. "I'm Dr. Patricia Nguyen, professor of computer science at Stanford University." And I can verify every piece of that technical data. Another voice, from the investor section. Dave Castillo stood, his former business partner credentials lending immediate weight. I'm Dave Castillo, co-founder of Neuralink Solutions. And I can verify the business fraud documented in those files. A third voice. Keisha Monroe, stepping out from the control booth, her engineer credentials visible on a lanyard around her neck. I'm Keisha Monroe, former lead engineer at Neuralink. I tried to report these fraudulent test results internally. I was fired, threatened with legal action, and blacklisted from the entire industry. The ballroom erupted. Investors shouting questions. Security frozen, unsure what to do. Lawyers trying to push toward the stage, but blocked by the crowd's surge. Jolie grabbed her microphone. These people signed NDAs. They're violating. NDAs don't protect fraud, Dave called out. That's established law. And we all know it. The screens continued cycling through evidence. Email after email. Financial records showing payments to journalists. Settlement agreements with whistleblowers. Document after document, each one more damning than the last. The crowd's mood was shifting. From confused to intrigued to angry. These were investors who'd put millions into TechVista stock based on Neuralink's promised performance. And they were watching evidence that it had all been a lie. Stock tickers on the side screens began dropping in real time. TechVista shares falling as word spread beyond the ballroom to trading floors and financial news networks. Larry's voice cut through the chaos, calm and clear. TechVista's stock price is inflated on fraudulent performance metrics. Ms. Dooley has spent 3 years silencing anyone who tried to tell the truth. Jolie stared at him, all pretense of control finally shattering. Her carefully constructed image crumbling in real time. You're just a janitor, she whispered, but the microphone caught it, amplified it, made it echo through the ballroom. Larry climbed the stairs to the stage, walking toward her with measured steps. I'm a Stanford PhD candidate who sacrificed my research to save my dying sister's life, he said, his voice steady and strong. I'm someone who spent 3 years being invisible while you built an empire on stolen work and systematic lies. I'm the person who documented every piece of fraud you committed because you thought the help was too insignificant to notice. He stood before her now, close enough to see the panic in her ice-blue eyes. I fit into your suit, Ms. Dooley. He walked to the Tom Ford display, removed the jacket from the mannequin, and put it on. Perfect fit. The crowd's roar was deafening, not applause for the suit, but recognition of what this moment represented. Justice, finally visible. Truth, finally spoken. Larry turned back to Jolie, the suit jacket settling perfectly on his transformed frame. But you'll never fit into mine. The ballroom exploded. Investors surged to their feet, shouting questions. Journalists rushed toward the stage, cameras flashing. The live stream chat scrolled so fast it was unreadable, thousands of comments per second as the world watched a billionaire's empire collapse in real time. Jolie stood frozen at the podium, her carefully constructed facade completely shattered. Her hands gripped the edges of the lectern so tightly her knuckles had gone white. Sweat beaded on her forehead despite the air conditioning. This is slander, she managed to shout into the microphone. My lawyers will. The screens changed again. Audio began playing through the sound system. Clear, undeniable, time-stamped. Jolie's own voice filled the ballroom. The AI doesn't need to work perfectly. It just needs to work long enough for us to cash out. The crowd went silent, listening. Another clip. If anyone questions the results, destroy their reputation. I don't care how. And another. Pay off whoever you need to. Journalists, reviewers, industry analysts. The cost of covering this up is significantly less than the cost of exposure. Each recording was accompanied by documentation on the screens, email timestamps, meeting schedules, security footage showing when and where the conversations occurred. Chain of custody evidence that would hold up in any court. Jolie's face cycled through emotions: shock, rage, panic, denial. How did you get? You underestimated the cleaning staff, Larry said, his voice carrying across the now silent ballroom. "Every night while you gave speeches about authentic leadership, I was documenting your fraud. Every time you stepped over me in the hallway, I was accessing servers you thought were secure. Every executive conversation in private offices, security cameras don't turn off just because the janitor is mopping floors." The screens shifted to video recordings now. Board meeting footage showing Jolie explicitly discussing evidence destruction. Time-stamped security recordings of late-night meetings where settlement offers were crafted for whistleblowers. And then the smoking gun. A video from 6 months ago appeared. Jolie at the head of a conference table, surrounded by TechVista's board of directors. Her recorded voice rang out clearly, "We have a potential SEC inquiry forming. Here's how we handle it. Destroy any physical documentation of test failures, scrub the servers of original data, and offer settlements to anyone who might talk. The cost of covering this up is significantly less than the cost of exposure." A board member's voice, "That's obstruction of justice." Jolie's smile, cold and calculating, "It's only obstruction if they can prove what we destroyed. And they can't prove what doesn't exist anymore." The ballroom erupted again, but this time the tone was different. This wasn't confusion or curiosity. This was fury. "My fund has 40 million in TechVista stock," an investor shouted. "We recommended this to our clients based on Neuralink's performance claims," another yelled. "How long has this been going on?" Who else knew? Jolie's legal team finally reached the stage, a phalanx of expensive suits trying to create a barrier between her and the crowd. The lead attorney grabbed a microphone. "These allegations are unsubstantiated." Actually, a new voice cut through the chaos. Two people stood up from seats near the front. The ones Larry had identified as SEC investigators. The woman pulled out credentials and held them high. "I'm Special Agent Linda Torres, Securities and Exchange Commission. My partner and I have been investigating TechVista and Neuralink solutions for the past 72 hours based on an anonymous tip." She looked directly at Larry, acknowledgement in her eyes. "The evidence presented here tonight corroborates our preliminary findings. Ms. Dooley, we have questions about potential securities fraud, obstruction of justice, and witness tampering. I'd strongly suggest you consult with your attorneys before making any further public statements." Jolie's lawyer immediately started whispering urgently in her ear, but she pushed him away, her composure finally shattering completely. "You don't understand," she shouted into the microphone, her voice cracking. "I built this company from nothing. I took risks that nobody else would take. I made the hard decisions that—" "You stole my research," Patengwyn called out, standing in the academic section. She held up a thick folder. "I have the original lab notes, time-stamped and witnessed. You copied my algorithm from Stanford servers and patented it as your own work." Pat walked toward the stage, her professorial authority commanding respect even in the chaos. "I tried to report it," she continued, her voice steady and clear. "The university administration asked me to reconsider because TechVista had donated $20 million for a new building. When I wouldn't back down, your legal team threatened to sue both me and Stanford for defamation." She reached the stage, laying the folder on the podium for everyone to see. "So I documented everything. Every stolen file. Every threatening email. Every institutional betrayal. And I waited for someone brave enough to bring it into the light." Dave Castillo moved through the crowd next, holding his own documentation. "I co-founded Neuralink with you," he said, his voice carrying pain and anger in equal measure. "I built the first prototype. I secured the initial funding. And you systematically erased me from the company's history." He held up partnership agreements, founding documents, early email chains, all showing his name alongside Jolie's. "You didn't just take credit for my work. You destroyed my reputation to cover up the theft. Your PR team whispered to every recruiter in Silicon Valley that I was dead weight and technically incompetent. I lost my career, my savings, my future, all so you could play solo genius founder for the media." Keisha Monroe stepped forward from the control booth area, her engineer's credentials visible. "I was lead engineer," she said, her voice shaking with controlled fury. I ran the test protocols. I saw the failure rates. I documented everything and brought it to you directly." She pulled out a tablet, displaying internal memos with her digital signature. "You told me to think like an entrepreneur instead of an engineer. You said the technology didn't need to work perfectly, just well enough to be fundable. When I said that was fraud, you had security escort me out. Then you blacklisted me from every tech company in Silicon Valley." Keisha's eyes were bright with tears, but her voice remained steady. "I've been unemployed for 18 months. Master's degree from Stanford, 6 years of experience, published research, and I can't get hired anywhere because you made sure my name is poison in this industry." The three of them stood before the stage: professor, co-founder, engineer. Each one a person Jolie had stepped on and dismissed as irrelevant. But they weren't invisible anymore. A journalist from TechCrunch stood up, press credentials clearly visible. "Ms. Dooley, our investigation shows TechVista made payments totaling over $300,000 to various tech journalists and analysts over the past 2 years. Always structured as consulting fees or speaking honorariums. Can you explain why these payments consistently preceded positive coverage of Neuralink?" Another journalist from Wired: "We have documents showing your legal team sent cease and desist letters to 14 bloggers and independent researchers who question Neuralink's performance claims. That's a pattern of suppression, not legitimate reputation management." The questions came rapid-fire now, from all directions. How many whistleblowers did you silence with NDAs? Were board members aware of the fraudulent test data? How much of TechVista's stock price is built on false claims? What's the real accuracy rate of Neuralink AI? Jolie looked around wildly, surrounded by lawyers trying to pull her away from the microphone, by investors demanding answers, by security unsure whether to protect her or contain the situation. Her eyes found Larry's, standing calmly on the stage in the suit that had started all of this. For the first time, she really saw him. Not as a joke. Not as invisible help. But as the person who had systematically documented and exposed every lie she'd built her empire on. "You're just a janitor," she said again, but this time it came out as a question. A desperate attempt to make sense of how someone she'd considered beneath notice had destroyed everything she'd built. Larry stepped closer to the microphone, his voice calm and clear. "I was a PhD candidate at Stanford, 2 semesters from completing groundbreaking research in ethical AI deployment." His words carried across the ballroom, captured by dozens of cameras. "My younger sister was diagnosed with leukemia at 19. Our parents were dead. She had no one else." He looked at Maya in her wheelchair, tears streaming down her face, pride blazing in her eyes. "So I dropped out. I took the first job that offered health insurance and flexible hours so I could keep her alive. Night janitor at TechVista, the company where my research had once been discussed in conference rooms I was now hired to clean." The ballroom was absolutely silent now. Even the journalists had stopped typing, listening. "For 3 years, I mopped the floors of my unrealized future. I was invisible. Irrelevant. Just the help." Larry's voice hardened. "Until the night you decided to make me the punchline of a joke for your entertainment. Until you bet me I couldn't fit into a suit worth more than I'd make in a year." He gestured to the Tom Ford jacket he was wearing. "You meant it as humiliation. As viral content. As proof that people like me don't belong in spaces like this." Larry looked directly at Jolie. "But what you actually did was remind me that I'd forgotten who I was. You reminded me that I had skills and intelligence and value that had nothing to do with the job title on my uniform. You reminded me that invisible doesn't mean powerless." He turned to address the crowd, the cameras, the world watching via live stream. "So I started investigating. Not for revenge, for truth. And every night while Ms. Dooley gave speeches about ethical leadership and authentic innovation, I documented the reality. The failure rates she hid. The whistleblowers she silenced. The research she stole. The journalists she bought. The evidence she destroyed." The screens began cycling through the evidence again, a comprehensive timeline of fraud, theft, and corruption spanning 6 years. 437 documents, Larry continued. 6 years of systematic fraud. Proof that Neuralink's AI never worked as claimed. Proof that TechVista's stock price is built on lies. Proof that Ms. Dooley built her empire by stealing other people's work and destroying anyone who questioned her. He pulled a USB drive from his pocket and held it up. Everything is documented. Chain of custody preserved. Multiple backup locations. Already shared with the SEC, the FBI, and investigative journalists at TechCrunch, Wired, and The Verge. You can try to suppress it, but it's too late. The truth is already out. Agent Torres stepped forward. Ms. Dooley, I'm going to have to ask you to come with us for formal questioning. You have the right to have your attorney present. No. Jolie's voice cracked, all pretense of control gone. You don't understand. Everyone does this. Everyone in Silicon Valley inflates their metrics, pays for good press, silences critics. It's how the game is played. The admission hung in the air, recorded by dozens of cameras. Her lead attorney grabbed her arm, hissing urgently, "Stop talking. Don't say another word." But Jolie pulled away, her panic overriding years of media training. She pointed at Larry, her hand shaking. He had access to restricted servers. He violated computer security protocols. He stole proprietary data. He's the criminal here, not me. Larry's expression didn't change. I accessed discarded hard drives from e-waste bins. I photographed documents visible in unsecured offices. I retrieved data from backup servers during authorized maintenance windows. Everything I did was legal under whistleblower protection statutes. He looked at Keisha, who nodded confirmation. More importantly, Larry continued, I documented fraud. Which is not only legal, it's a civic obligation. The stock ticker on the side screens showed TechVista shares in free fall. Down 42%. Down 51%. Down 63%. Billions of dollars evaporating in real time as the truth spread across financial networks. An investor in the front row stood up, his face red with fury. I have $30 million in TechVista stock. $30 million based on Neuralink's claimed performance. Do you understand what you've done? I've told you the truth about what you actually invested in, Larry replied calmly. The losses aren't my responsibility. They're hers. He gestured to Jolie. She's the one who sold you a lie. More investors stood, shouting, demanding answers. The SEC agents were trying to create a path to escort Jolie out. Security was attempting crowd control. Journalists were broadcasting live, their voices overlapping in a cacophony of breaking news alerts. In the chaos, Larry walked to where the Tom Ford suit jacket still hung on the mannequin. He carefully removed it, folded it precisely, and set it on the podium. Then he walked to the edge of the stage and looked out at the crowd. At Ray in the front row, standing now, his weathered face creased with pride. At Maya in her wheelchair, crying and smiling simultaneously. At Pat, Dave, and Keisha, the alliance that had made this possible. At the investigators who would ensure justice was actually served. At the journalists who would tell the full story. At 500 witnesses who could never unsee what had just happened. Larry spoke into the microphone one final time. 6 months ago, I was humiliated in front of 200 people and millions more online. I was made to feel worthless, invisible, irrelevant. And for a moment, I believed it. His voice grew stronger. But then I remembered something important. Your job title doesn't define your worth. Your bank account doesn't determine your value. Your appearance doesn't measure your character. He looked directly at Jolie, who was being escorted toward a side exit by her lawyers and the SEC agents. The greatest revenge isn't destroying someone who humiliated you. It's building something so true, so honest, so grounded in actual integrity that their illusions crumble in comparison. Larry stepped back from the microphone as the ballroom erupted one final time, but this time, it was applause. Not for a viral moment. Not for entertainment. But for truth, finally spoken after years of silence. For justice, finally visible after being buried under money and power. For every invisible person who'd ever been told they didn't matter. Security finally cleared a path, and Jolie was escorted out through a side door, her lawyers surrounding her, her face a mask of devastation and disbelief. The last image of her that night, captured by dozens of cameras and replayed millions of times, looking back over her shoulder at Larry standing calmly on the stage in a suit that fit perfectly, having just dismantled everything she'd built with nothing but the truth and the courage to speak it. The suit had never mattered. The transformation had never been about weight loss. It had always been about remembering that invisible people could choose to be seen. And when they chose that moment carefully, with truth as their weapon and justice as their goal, they could change everything. The gala dissolved into chaos. Investors demanding emergency board meetings. Journalists filing stories that would dominate tomorrow's headlines. SEC agents beginning what would become one of the largest fraud investigations in Silicon Valley history. But Larry walked off that stage, past the abandoned Tom Ford suit, toward his sister waiting in her wheelchair. Maya grabbed his hand as he approached, tears streaming down her face. "You did it," she whispered. "You showed them." "We did it," Larry corrected, kneeling beside her wheelchair. "All of us." Everyone she tried to silence. Ray appeared beside them, his hand on Larry's shoulder. "That was the weapon we built. Not just muscle. Character." Pat, Dave, and Keisha joined them, the alliance complete and vindicated. They stood together in the chaos of the crumbling gala, 5 people who'd been dismissed as irrelevant, now standing at the center of the biggest scandal in tech industry history. And for the first time in 3 years, Larry Earley wasn't invisible. He was exactly who he'd always been. And that had been enough to bring down an empire. 72 hours after the gala, the world had fundamentally changed. Larry sat in his cramped East Palo Alto apartment, his old laptop open on the fold-out table, watching his life transform in real time across every news outlet and social media platform. The headlines were everywhere. TechVista CEO Jolie Dooley faces federal fraud charges, Wall Street Journal. The janitor who exposed Silicon Valley's biggest fraud, New York Times. Neuralink AI scandal, how a viral challenge uncovered billions in fraud, TechCrunch. From invisible to invaluable, the Larry Earley story wired. The stock market had opened Monday morning with TechVista shares in complete free fall, down 68% from Friday's close. Trading halted twice for volatility. Institutional investors were pulling out en masse, their statements carefully worded to distance themselves from the scandal while threatening lawsuits. By Tuesday afternoon, TechVista's board had held an emergency meeting. The announcement came at 4:47 p.m. Pacific. Jolie Dooley had been removed as CEO, effective immediately. The board was cooperating fully with federal investigators and conducting an internal audit of all Neuralink-related claims. By Wednesday morning, the first lawsuits had been filed. 7 civil cases from defrauded investors seeking class action status. The SEC had formally announced a full investigation into securities fraud, with criminal referrals to the Department of Justice for potential obstruction of justice charges. Jolie's assets had been frozen. Her passport confiscated. House arrest while awaiting formal charges. Her multimillion-dollar penthouse in San Francisco transformed into a gilded cage. The tech press was calling it the biggest scandal since Theranos. Bigger, some argued, because TechVista was a publicly traded company with billions in market cap and thousands of employees whose lives would be affected. But the story that dominated wasn't just about the fraud. It was about Larry. #Janitor Challenge had exploded beyond anything the original viral moment had achieved. 50 million views across platforms. But the narrative had completely transformed. This wasn't mockery or entertainment anymore. It was inspiration. The top trending thread on Twitter came from a user with 2.3 million followers. Larry Earley spent 3 years being invisible so his sister could live. Then spent 6 months transforming his body and investigating fraud and maintaining the very job that gave him access to evidence. He didn't just fit the suit. He dismantled a billionaire's empire with nothing but truth and discipline. That's not revenge. That's justice. The replies numbered in the hundreds of thousands. This is what actual integrity looks like. I've been underestimated my whole life because of my job. This story reminded me that my work doesn't define my worth. He could have just lost the weight and walked away. Instead, he exposed systemic fraud and gave voice to everyone she silenced. Legend. Larry's phone hadn't stopped ringing. Reporters requesting interviews. Book publishers offering advances. Documentary filmmakers wanting exclusive rights to his story. Hollywood agents talking about movie deals. He declined almost everything. There was one call he did take. Stanford University's Dean of Engineering, Dr. Richard Chun, called Tuesday afternoon with a formal offer, full reinstatement to the PhD program with complete funding, including a retroactive stipend covering the 3 years he'd been away. An official apology for the university's failure to support him when his sister fell ill. And an invitation to continue his research on ethical AI deployment with full institutional backing. Your algorithm is more relevant now than ever, Dr. Chen had said. After this scandal, the industry needs voices like yours. People who understand that technology should serve humanity, not exploit it. Larry had accepted. His start date was in 6 weeks. Enough time to transition out of his janitorial position, though TechVista had already offered him a generous severance package, clearly hoping to avoid any appearance of retaliation against a whistleblower. The alliance had their own victories unfolding. Keisha Monroe received calls from 7 different tech companies within 48 hours of the gala. All of them apologizing for their previous rejection, all offering senior engineering positions with substantial salaries. She'd accepted an offer from a competitor to become their chief technology officer, with explicit authority to build an ethics review board for AI development. I'm going to make sure what happened to me never happens to another engineer who tells the truth, she told Larry during a call Tuesday night. No more silencing whistleblowers. No more punishing people for having integrity. Dave Castillo had been contacted by 3 venture capital firms interested in partnering with him to launch a founder-friendly VC fund. His name was being rehabilitated across the industry, articles correcting the record about Neuralink's founding, interviews where he finally got to tell his story. I'm calling it ethical capital, he'd said. We're only funding companies that prioritize transparency and authentic metrics. No more growth at all costs mentality. No more rewarding people who lie their way to valuations. Dr. Patricia Nguyen received a formal apology from Stanford's administration and a promotion to Department Chair of Computer Science. The university had also announced a new whistleblower protection policy for researchers and a commitment to never again silence faculty who report misconduct, regardless of donor relationships. It shouldn't have taken a public scandal, Pat had said in her statement to the press. But I'm grateful that Larry's courage created the space for institutional change. Now we can make sure future students don't have their work stolen without consequences. Even Jamal Washington's daughter, Alicia, was seeing vindication. 3 companies had reached out to her directly, apologizing for their previous rejection and offering positions. She'd accepted a role at a startup focused on transparent AI development, her blacklisting finally broken. Ray Brooks had become an unlikely media figure. The gruff former Army Ranger who trained Larry through his transformation was being interviewed by fitness magazines, podcasts, and morning shows about his philosophy of building weapons of character, not just bodies. Physical transformation is the easy part, he told Good Morning America. Any trainer can help you lose weight. But Larry did something harder. He transformed who he was while maintaining absolute discipline toward a goal bigger than himself. That's what I'm proud of. Iron Haven Gym's membership had tripled. Ray was hiring additional trainers and expanding to a second location, all while maintaining his no-nonsense, no-excuses philosophy. And Maya. Larry visited her apartment Wednesday afternoon, bringing takeout from the Thai place they both loved. She was sitting on her couch surrounded by acceptance letters from design schools across the country. Parsons reconsidered my application, she said, her eyes bright with tears. Full scholarship. They said my resilience and artistic vision made me an ideal candidate. She laughed. Pretty sure your story going viral helped, but I'll take it. Her health was continuing to improve. The experimental treatment was working better than anyone had hoped. Her oncologist was using words like full remission and long-term survival probability with increasing confidence. You saved my life twice, Maya said, setting down the acceptance letters and taking her brother's hand. Once by sacrificing everything to keep me alive. And once by showing me that fighting back matters. That we don't have to accept being invisible. Larry squeezed her hand. You saved mine too. You're the reason I kept going when I wanted to quit. Every morning at 5 a.m. when I wanted to stay in bed, every night when I was terrified of getting caught, I kept thinking about you fighting in that hospital bed. If you could fight that hard, I could too. They sat together in comfortable silence, eating pad thai and watching the sunset through her apartment window. What happens now? Maya asked eventually. Now. Larry considered. I go back to Stanford. Finish my PhD. Make sure my research on ethical AI actually helps prevent what Jolie did from happening again. And the media circus will die down eventually. Someone else will do something dramatic and everyone will move on. Larry smiled. Which is fine with me. I never wanted to be famous. I just wanted to be seen. Well, you're definitely seen now. Yeah. But I'm looking forward to going back to being invisible. Just in a different way. Invisible like someone quietly doing important work. Not invisible like someone people look through. His phone buzzed with yet another call from a news producer. Larry declined it and turned the phone face down on the coffee table. No more interviews. Maya asked. I did one with 60 Minutes because I wanted the full story documented properly. After that airs Sunday, I'm done. Let the evidence speak for itself. The 60 Minutes interview had been Larry's only major media appearance. He'd spent 2 hours with their correspondent, walking through the entire investigation, the evidence collection, the alliance formation. They'd interviewed Keisha, Dave, Pat, Ray, and even Maya. A comprehensive documentation of how systematic fraud was exposed by people who refused to stay silent. The preview clips were already generating millions of views. But Larry hadn't watched them. He'd said what he needed to say. The rest was just repetition. On Thursday, 5 days after the gala, formal charges were announced. Jolie Dooley was indicted on 17 counts: securities fraud, wire fraud, obstruction of justice, witness tampering, theft of intellectual property, and conspiracy. If convicted on all counts, she faced up to 40 years in federal prison. TechVista's general counsel and 3 board members were also indicted as co-conspirators, having knowingly participated in the cover-up of Neuralink's performance failures. The press conference was carried live on every major network. Federal prosecutors stood before a bank of microphones, flanked by SEC and FBI officials, laying out a case built substantially on the evidence Larry had collected over 5 months of night shifts. This investigation represents one of the largest corporate fraud cases in the history of the technology sector, the lead prosecutor stated. Billions of dollars in investor funds were secured based on false performance claims. Whistleblowers were systematically silenced. Evidence was deliberately destroyed. And the architects of this fraud attempted to obstruct federal investigation. The prosecutor held up a USB drive. We want to acknowledge that this case would not have been possible without the courage of multiple whistleblowers who refused to be silenced. Particularly Mr. Larry Earley, whose methodical documentation and willingness to come forward provided the foundation for this prosecution. Larry watched the press conference from his apartment, feeling strangely detached. This was the culmination of everything he'd worked for, but it felt less like victory and more like completion. Like finishing a difficult but necessary task. Justice was happening. The system was working. People who'd been silenced were being heard. That was enough. His phone rang. This time, he answered. It was an unknown number, but when he picked up, the voice was immediately recognizable. Mr. Earley? This is Linda Torres, SEC Special Agent. We met at the gala. I remember. I wanted to call personally to thank you. What you did, the evidence you collected, the care you took with documentation, the courage it took to come forward, it's exactly what whistleblower protections are designed to encourage. You made our job possible. I just documented what I found. You did more than that. You gave voice to people who'd been silenced. You provided accountability where institutions had failed. That matters more than you probably realize. After they hung up, Larry sat for a long time looking at his cramped apartment. The fold-out table where he'd spent countless nights organizing evidence. The corner where he'd done bodyweight exercises when he was too tired to make it to Ray's gym. The hospital bills in a folder on his desk, mostly covered by insurance, but still representing 3 years of financial sacrifice. This place had been his home during the invisible years. Soon, he'd be moving to graduate student housing near Stanford, returning to the academic life he'd left behind. But he'd never forget what he'd learned here. That invisibility could be a weapon. That the people society overlooks often see the most. That dignity isn't bestowed by job titles or bank accounts. It's something you maintain yourself, regardless of circumstances. 10 days after the gala, Larry cleaned out his locker at Tech Vista for the last time. The building felt different now. Half empty. Whole departments had been laid off as the company restructured. The executive floor was dark, offices cleared out, the gleaming surfaces collecting dust. Larry walked through the corridors one final time, pushing an empty cleaning cart purely out of habit. Past the conference rooms where his research had once been discussed. Past Jolie's former office, now sealed with evidence tape. Past the showroom where the Tom Ford suit had been displayed. The suit was gone, seized as evidence. But Larry didn't need it anymore. He'd proven what he needed to prove. In the basement locker room, he changed out of his janitor's uniform for the last time. Folded it carefully and left it in his locker with his ID badge and building access card. On his way out, he passed the security desk where Jamal usually worked. Jamal was there, his weathered face breaking into a smile when he saw Larry. Last day. Last day. Alicia got a job. Did I tell you? You did. I'm really glad. Jamal came around the desk and extended his hand. Thank you. For including her story. For making sure people knew what happened to her. They shook hands, two men who'd worked night shifts while the world slept, who'd seen what others missed, who'd chosen to speak when silence would have been easier. Take care of yourself, Larry Earley. You too, Jamal. Larry walked out of Tech Vista headquarters for the last time as an employee. The California sun was setting, painting the Silicon Valley sky in shades of orange and gold. He drove to Iron Haven for one final evening workout before his schedule shifted to accommodate Stanford's academic calendar. Ray was waiting, as always. They didn't talk much. Just moved through the routine they'd built together. The workout that had transformed Larry's body while his investigation transformed his purpose. At the end, Ray pulled out a photograph. The before picture from 5 months ago, Larry at 340 pounds, exhausted eyes, defeated posture. He set it next to the mirror. Larry looked at his reflection. 210 pounds, lean muscle, clear eyes, confident bearing. Then at the photograph. The same person, but transformed. That's not about the weight, Ray said quietly. That's about remembering who you were and choosing who you became. Larry nodded, unable to speak past the lump in his throat. You built 2 weapons, Ray continued. The physical one everyone can see. And the internal one that actually mattered. Character. Discipline. Purpose. That's what brought down an empire. Not muscle. Not the suit. You. They stood in silence for a moment. I'm proud of you, Ray said. More than you'll ever know. I couldn't have done it without you. Yes, you could have. I just gave you the structure. You did the work. Ray gripped his shoulder. Now go finish your PhD. Build something that makes the world better. That's the final weapon, using what you learned to help others. 2 weeks after the gala, on a Sunday evening, the 60 Minutes feature aired. Larry watched it with Maya, Ray, Keisha, Dave, and Pat gathered in Maya's small apartment. They'd ordered pizza and were prepared to cringe through the media's interpretation of their story. But the piece was better than expected. The correspondent had done her homework. She'd interviewed everyone involved, cross-referenced the evidence, and presented a comprehensive account of how systematic fraud was exposed not by regulators or journalists, but by a night janitor who refused to accept invisibility. The climax was footage from the gala, Larry walking down that center aisle, the screens filling with evidence, Jolie's facade crumbling in real time. The moment truth became undeniable. The correspondent's closing words. Larry Earley could have simply lost the weight, tried on the suit, and walked away with his dignity restored. Instead, he chose to expose fraud that had deceived investors, silenced whistleblowers, and corrupted an entire company. He transformed not just his body, but the trajectory of justice in Silicon Valley. And in doing so, he reminded us that the people we overlook, the ones we consider invisible, often see what the powerful try to hide. His message is simple: respect is earned through character, not suits. And when someone tries to make you small, remember, they're terrified of how big you actually are. The screen faded to black. Maya wiped tears from her eyes. They got it right. Yeah, Larry agreed. They did. 6 months after the gala, Larry Earley stood in Stanford's auditorium, defending his PhD dissertation. The room was packed, unusual for a dissertation defense, but his story had made him a somewhat reluctant academic celebrity. Students, faculty, journalists, and even a few tech industry leaders filled the seats. His dissertation title, Ethical Frameworks for AI Deployment, Preventing Systematic Fraud Through Transparent Development and Institutional Accountability. It was based partly on his original research from 3 years ago, but expanded significantly to include case studies from the Neuralink scandal. A comprehensive analysis of how fraudulent AI claims are constructed, marketed, and protected, and how institutions can prevent such fraud through proper oversight. The defense lasted 2 hours. Larry presented his findings calmly, answered questions thoroughly, and demonstrated mastery of his field that reminded everyone why he'd been on track to complete this degree before life intervened. When the committee chair announced, "Congratulations, Dr. Earley," the room erupted in applause. Maya was in the front row, healthy and strong, no wheelchair needed. She'd started at Parsons the previous month and was already thriving. Beside her sat Ray, in his dress uniform, chest full of medals, eyes bright with pride. Pat sat with the faculty, her smile wide. Dave and Keisha were there too, representing the alliance that had made everything possible. After the ceremony, there was a small reception. Larry was surrounded by well-wishers, job offers, research opportunities. A nonprofit focused on AI ethics wanted to acquire his algorithm for $50 million, with guarantees it would never be commercialized or used for profit. The money would fund research, education, and development of ethical AI frameworks. Larry had already agreed. The contracts would be signed next week. Some of the money would pay off Maya's medical bills completely. Some would fund scholarships for students whose lives were interrupted by family crises, so they wouldn't have to choose between education and survival the way Larry had. But most of it would fund research into preventing exactly the kind of fraud Jolie Dooley had perpetrated. As the reception wound down, Larry found himself alone for a moment on Stanford's campus. He walked to the computer science building, to the lab where he'd once worked before everything changed. The late afternoon sun slanted through the windows, illuminating workstations where current PhD candidates were hunched over their research, lost in the pursuit of knowledge. Larry remembered being one of them. Before Maya's diagnosis. Before the night shifts. Before invisibility. But he didn't regret the path his life had taken. Without those 3 years of being invisible, he never would have understood how much people miss when they only see job titles and appearances. He never would have had access to document Jolie's fraud. He never would have learned the discipline that Ray taught him. He never would have become who he was now. His phone buzzed. A message notification. It was from an email address he didn't recognize, routed through Stanford's internal system. When he opened it, his breath caught. The letter was from San Francisco Women's Correctional Facility. From Jolie Dooley. Larry stood very still for a moment, then opened it. The handwriting was shaky, nothing like the confident signature he'd seen on corporate documents. Dear Larry, I've had 6 months in here to think about what I did. Not just the fraud, I'm still being deposed about that almost daily, but what I did to you. The humiliation. The casual cruelty. The joke I made at your expense for my entertainment. My lawyers tell me not to write to you. They say anything I put in writing can be used in the civil cases. But I don't care anymore. You deserve to hear this. You didn't just expose my lies. You showed me what integrity actually looks like. What it means to sacrifice for something bigger than yourself. What authentic leadership is, as opposed to the performance of it I'd mastered. I'm sorry I couldn't see you when you were right in front of me. I was too busy performing success to actually achieve anything real. Too focused on appearances to build something with substance. You asked nothing from me. You just mopped floors, took care of your sister, and quietly documented the truth. While I was giving TED Talks about ethics, you were actually living them. Thank you for forcing me to face what I'd become. I deserved everything that happened. You deserved none of what I did to you. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I wanted you to know that you changed more than just TechVista or my life. You changed how I understand what actually matters. Congratulations on your PhD. I read about your defense in the news they allow us here. Your algorithm for ethical AI is what I should have been building all along, instead of stealing other people's work and calling it innovation. I hope you build something beautiful with your freedom. I'll be spending the next decade contemplating what I destroyed with mine. Jolie. Larry read the letter twice, then folded it carefully and put it in his pocket. He felt, not forgiveness exactly. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But something close to closure. Jolie Dooley had spent her life building illusions. Now she was facing the truth of what that cost. The consequences were hers to bear. Larry's job wasn't to forgive or condemn. It was simply to move forward, building something true in the space her lies had occupied. He walked back toward the reception, where his friends and family waited. Maya saw him coming and smiled. You okay? Yeah, Larry said. I'm good. And he was. Dr. Larry Earley, Stanford PhD, ethical AI researcher, former invisible janitor who'd chosen to be seen at exactly the right moment. He'd fit into the suit. But more importantly, he'd built something that couldn't be measured in fabric or weight or appearance. He'd built a life of purpose, of truth, of justice. And that fit perfectly. 1 year later, the headline appeared in Wired magazine's annual People Who Changed Tech issue. Dr. Larry Earley, the janitor who cleaned up Silicon Valley. The article detailed his work at Stanford's new Center for Ethical AI Development, funded partially by the acquisition of his algorithm. His research was setting new standards for transparency in AI deployment, preventing the kind of fraudulent claims that had characterized the Neuralink scandal. But the article also mentioned something else. Every semester, Dr. Earley taught a course called Invisible Systems, Understanding Power, Access, and Accountability in Technology. The course was always oversubscribed, with waitlists hundreds of students long. On the first day of class, he always told the same story. About a janitor who mopped floors while his dreams deferred. About a billionaire who built an empire on lies. About a challenge meant as humiliation that became an investigation. About 5 months that transformed everything. And he always ended with the same message. The people society overlooks often see the most. Your job title doesn't define your worth. Your circumstances don't determine your value. And when someone tries to make you small, remember, they're terrified of how big you actually are. The greatest revenge isn't destroying someone who humiliated you. It's building something so true that their illusions crumble in comparison. Now let's talk about building systems that make fraud impossible, truth visible, and invisible people seen. The students would lean forward, notebooks open, ready to learn. And Dr. Larry Earley would begin teaching. Not just about AI or ethics or technology, but about the weapon that mattered most. Character. Thank you for watching. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever been underestimated, dismissed because of your job title, or made invisible by people who should have seen your worth, remember Larry's journey. Respect is earned through character, not suits. Justice is built through truth, not power. And transformation happens when you stop accepting invisibility and choose to be seen. Subscribe. Share. And never forget, no one is just anything. We're all exactly who we choose to become.